It's week 1, and it is so good to be back as Zero RB Bros freak the fuck out that their running back 2 scored 3.5 fantasy points. This is Stat Chasing.
Pat Fryer Helmo.
This is why I'm hot.
Anita Handjob.
Fix your sight.
Jamar. Alpha play chase.
Are you kidding me? Kadarius Toney?
You can't handle the heat.
It looks like we're finally this boys. You're right.
All right, week 1. It feels so good to be back, Drico. I am super excited to go through all of these charts with you.
Yeah, really excited, and I think we made some improvements as well. Big upgrade to the quarterback chart that we talked about making last year. We made for this year.
Yep, we were in the lab, hard at work on the quarterback chart. Took us the entire offseason. We were slaving away at it.
We definitely didn't leave it to the absolute very last minute.
No. I mean, we were messaging. I think it was 2 days after the Super Bowl. You messaged me. You're like, dude, we got to get to work on this quarterback chart. It's going to take us months.
I think I did actually message you at that time frame, and then we didn't actually do it.
We did very much talk about improvements to the back then, but we did absolutely nothing until like the final hour. But we got it all done.
So getting into it here, I'm gonna. That doesn't work.
The biggest improvement we made was we made them all much smaller and harder to read.
God damn it! No.
Well, while Drico gets the chart up there, I'll describe a little bit of the changes, but I'm going to leave the heavy lifting on describing the charts to Drico.
Okay.
But the chart, one of the things that we didn't like about it last year was it showed some stats that we thought were important for quarterback, but it was less intuitive for fantasy friendliness. So I'll go ahead and let Drico explain what we're looking at here.
Right. So our chart, like Slack alluded to there, our chart last year, it focused a lot on efficiency. And efficiency, very, very important. We like efficiency because particularly when passing the ball, touchdowns, yardage, efficiency is what drives a lot of pocket passers' points. And then we have rushing. But what's also important is volume. We do want we don't want like small or we don't necessarily want small volume, high efficiency when it doesn't get us that many points.
But there is an exception to that rule of small volume, high efficiency, and that brings me to Anthony Richardson, who completed 9 passes on the week, but he did it for 212 yards. So he's a really good example of, I mean, these guys that are going to be in this upper left quadrant here, the really good adjusted yards per attempt, but low expected fantasy points from passing. The way that I read them is they just probably come with a good amount of volatility. Like, and obviously we've only got 1 week of data in here right now. So, you know, this chart is going to normalize as we get more weeks in here, and the guys, you know, get to more along the lines of where their true place on the chart is going to be. But if a guy lives in this upper left quadrant, I would just say they're likely a more volatile profile. Do you think that's a fair assessment to make, Drico?
Yeah, so I think if like specifically Josh Allen, Anthony Richardson, so those guys added somewhere between 18 and 20 points from passing. And so when you add that on top of their rushing score, then yeah, that's going to be a great week. You're going to get a great score from your quarterback that week. But I think it's kind of like those guys are kind of unicorns in that regard. Whereas if you had that profile without the rushing, then yeah, it's like, oh, you had a great week and you got 25 points, but then some weeks it's going to be 15.
Like Brock Purdy's a great example of that without the rushing. Like he is going to be freakishly efficient, but he's not rushing very much. And so the weeks where Brock Purdy is chucking a bunch of touchdowns, you're going to be really happy you played him. But the weeks where the touchdowns come on the ground instead, you're going to be a little less happy. See, he's got 15 expected fantasy points there just from his passing volume, but he's not really adding anything in the way of rushing. And he already is very efficient at 8 adjusted yards per attempt. And these numbers for Josh Allen and Anthony Richardson, like, they will not stay at, above 10 adjusted yards per attempt throughout the season. Those are going to come down. Other guys that we see with crazy efficiency in week 1 are Baker Mayfield and Derek Carr. And while I certainly expect their efficiency to come down as well, they did have decent volume for both of them, in spite of the Saints just absolutely beating the brakes off of the Panthers. So I think Carr and Baker are good guys to talk about for. Do you think that their performance was driven more by the poor defenses they each played, or for Carr, is it the new offensive coordinator there? What are we looking at for each of them?
So Derek Carr, as you can kind of see from the chart, they took the ball a decent amount. So he had about 18 expected points from passing, and then good efficiency as well to get him to around 26. And I guess one thing that's a little bit interesting is that when you look at the Saints pass rate over expected, it was 8.5, or say minus 8.5. So that's kind of interesting. So that kind of suggests that he had a lot of red zone stuff.
Well, he did have he had a couple red zone touchdowns, right, to the tight ends, and then he also had the really deep ball to Shaheed, and he almost
that will come with a high expected fantasy points.
Yeah,
and they only took it 42.5 times.
He almost had the hat trick there with touchdowns to Saints tight ends, depending on how you classify Taysom Hill, because Taysom almost came down with a tight end or with a touchdown on a wheel route. It was a pretty incredible. I was surprised that Taysom Hill was the guy they were drawing that up for, but I mean, it was darn near a very impressive catch there. But Carr will have to settle for just 2 touchdowns to 2 different Saints tight ends. Maybe he can hit the hat trick a different week. Other guys that live in our favorite quadrant, this top right quadrant, where you are passing with a lot of volume and you're also doing so efficiently. These are the guys that are going to be really ideal for fantasy. And certainly if you happen to be a rushing quarterback as well, and you can somehow find yourself here, that's the cheat code. Josh Allen, in years past would live here. I'm a little concerned that the Bills told us exactly who they were last season, and a large chunk of the fantasy industry just plugged their ears and did the la 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 I'm not listening thing. They're like, yeah, well, when we do our projection model, we're not actually going to use the Bills pass rate from the second half of the season. We're going to use something closer to the historical average because they really didn't pass very much in the second half. It's like, nope, that's just what they want to do now. At least that's how it looks week 1. I mean, Josh Allen looks like the entire offense, and they did not throw very many times. I think he had just 30 total dropbacks, and only 23 of them turned into pass attempts. So the Bills seem like they might be a low passing volume offense, which is going to be a bit of a departure for Josh Allen. But I don't really think it matters for his fantasy value. And kind of the 2 ships in the night for rushing quarterbacks.
Just to stop on Josh Allen. So I think it's important for Josh Allen that his team is going to live and die by what he does. And so if the Bills are having a bad day, he probably will have more attempts. But having kind of like lost Stephon Diggs and them going to this more rush heavy attack, I guess it does make me a little bit more concerned for his stability than it would have been in years past. I do think there is some of that possibility that it's the floor is going to be lower this year.
Yeah, great shout there. I agree with that 100%. I think, where he's really hurt the most is in his floor. You can always get the insane ceiling games from Josh Allen because he might just score every touchdown for his team in any given week. But the guy who I wanted to compare to him is Lamar Jackson, who we saw pass at an absurd rate. He had, I believe, his second most attempts in his entire career. Now, granted, they were trailing in that game, which is something they did not do very often last year. And I'm wondering, I certainly think there's a lot of it that came down to the fact that, they were just in an absolute battle with the Chiefs and really needed to throw to stay in it. And it's not like Lamar did not run in that game either. He was spectacular on the ground, leading the league for quarterback rushing yards. He's very good in week 1 on the ground. I think we'll see his expected fantasy points from passing come down a bit as they play opponents that, are not the Chiefs. But what are your thoughts on what we saw from the Ravens?
So obviously this is going to be the maybe not. I don't know if it's going to be the highest passing game or attempt game of the year for them, but this is the upper echelon for them, passing heavy. And then one thing that's kind of interesting a little bit is that they actually their pass rate was 2.7 under expected. So I think that's a little bit interesting. In that it wasn't they're still pretty close to neutral there, and it'll be interesting to see in game scripts that tend more to them being winning if they're still cutting pretty close to that pass rate over expected. But that to say, it was game script driven. Also think the efficiency here being relatively low for Lamar. They were playing the Chiefs defense, so would expect kind of lower volume, but more efficient outings in the future. But I think you're pretty likely to get you're still alive to get the kind of games that we did last year, where if the Ravens go up enough, they stop throwing the ball.
You snuck a little likely pun in there. I don't know if that was on purpose, but I appreciated it. I'd just say that when you get to a situation where your expected pass rate is so high, I think they had 70% pass plays. Yeah. Even, it's hard to be over expected in that. Even the most, unless you're Andy Reid, you're not really getting over your expected pass rate there. He's the only guy that is just why do we run the ball at all? We should throw every play. Moving, are there any other guys in this really good quadrant that you want to talk about here?
Yeah, I guess that Detroit are interesting as well in that they did have a really high, expected points from passing, but I think a lot of that was driven by their total number of plays. They did go to overtime, but when you look at their pass rate over expected, that was minus 8.3%. So I think seeing that low number it is a little bit concerning, especially with where Amon-Ra was going, with where Laporta was going. I'm not quite alarmed there, but I think that's something where it's something to monitor. It's definitely something to monitor, because I don't think the correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think the Rams I don't think they've been this kind of run funnel team.
No, I don't think so. I just think that's what Detroit wants to. Detroit really would like to run the ball a lot. That's
right. And with how highly drafted those guys were, that's a little bit concerning, I think.
Yeah, I think that's a good shout. With them getting so much of their passing volume just coming from the really high play volume from going into overtime and being in a competitive game with the Rams, you might see lower pass volume there. So I would expect Goff to trend more towards the middle of this chart here. I would expect his efficiency to stay pretty good, though. Right. It's a well-designed offense. They have a bunch of really good weapons. Same for CJ Stroud. If anything, CJ Stroud having 20 expected fantasy points from passing with Joe Mixon getting 30 carries. I mean, I think that the ceiling is pretty astronomical for CJ Stroud. It just remains to be seen how much the Texans want to actually cut him loose.
Right.
And I think a big part of
They
that
have
is
to be pushed. They really have to be pushed.
it's going to come down to how good they are and how good their opponents are, right?
Yeah, for sure. Like if they get behind in the game script, that's when you're going to see fireworks from CJ Stroud. Obviously, you do have 20 expected points from passing here, so you do have good volume. But that's another one where their pass rate over expected was negative, and so some of that is just play volume count. And so if they if they get up big, and not sure how often that happens this year, that would be something where you're concerned about Stroud's counting stats in those games.
Yeah, I don't want to just blow by these other guys that were in our good quadrant, but for Tua, I don't really have a ton to. It looks like the Dolphins' offense from last year, except with more Achane in the receiving game. We'll talk about running backs later.
Didn't learn. I don't think we didn't learn anything new about Tua. I don't think.
Right, and
he's going to be efficient.
Yeah,
the offense is going to revolve around him trying to Tyreek and Waddle.
Yeah, and for Mahomes, I mean, the only thing that we learned there was really about the quality of their receivers this year relative to last year. It's substantially better. For all the people that were predicting that this might be a Mahomes scorched earth season where he gets back to his over 5,000 yards and 40 touchdowns type of seasons. Week 1 has you feeling pretty bullish about that. I think the Chiefs are going to be really fun. I believe that they play the Bengals next week, and man, if the Bengals play like they did against the Patriots, it could get really, really ugly.
Yeah.
They might get dog walked there. A couple other guys that were kind of on the fringe of our favorite quadrant. Darnold just looks like he's a quarterback operating in a really well-designed offense. I mean, it was this way last year as well after they lost Cousins. Whoever was going to play quarterback for the Minnesota Vikings was going to do well. Like, it's just very much like the San Francisco system. Like, it is a good system. Like, quarterbacks are set up for success there. So
I think one bit of caution on like getting too excited about Darnold is they did play the Panthers. And that feels like one where we just have the 1 week data point. Let's not just like assume that Darnold is going to be just really good now. We still a little bit of caution warranted there, but I don't think that's anything controversial. Yeah,
they play the Giants, not the Panthers, but Giants.
Right. Yeah, you're right.
Giants also not very good. I would assume if you made me guess which defense is going to be the better defense over the course of the year, I would assume the Giants are better than the Panthers, but I think they're probably both bad.
Right.
So the other guy I wanted to mention was Hurts. He did really poorly as a passer. He had one of the worst PFF passing grades on the week. Are you at all concerned about Hurts?
I am not really. I don't think so. Those PFF grades. I think I saw something that those PFF grades they tend to correlate pretty highly with the quarterback's average depth of target, and so if they're not throwing it down the field much, they're not going to get those. They're not going to get a high PFF grade. I think that's mainly over single game samples. He didn't play great. You see just 6.7 adjusted yards per attempt. That is a good bit below where he sort of started off last year. So I guess you could be a little bit concerned with that. But I think there's two things. It's a long season. You're going to see games from guys where it's not quite at their expectation. I still think Hurts is really good. He's got some really good receivers. I saw some kind of encouraging stuff about Devonta Smith in the slot and being smart about that. And then the other thing that, and I'm not sure how much this matters, but he is a mobile quarterback. His mobility is important, and they definitely struggled with the surface there. So that was a game where I kind of watched start to finish, and there was a lot of moments where nobody's open. He goes to make a move, and he's like Bambi on the ice, I think that's something where I'm not changing my opinion on Hurts yet.
Yeah, I am in lockstep with you. Don't think there's any reason to panic there. The tush push stuff, I mean, again, how much of that is just, it's week one, they're kind of getting their feet under them, or they quite literally couldn't get their feet under them. They're on a new field, so they're on the bad field there. So I'm not concerned about Hurts at all really here. But let's transition to guys that we are concerned about. So moving to the bottom two quadrants, if you end up really low in either of these quadrants, even the high volume one, sometimes like these guys in the high volume quadrant, like Bryce Young, Deshaun Watson, Daniel Jones, Bo Nix, they're
they're high volume because they're playing so bad. Their team
exactly. Yeah, it's high volume because they're losing really badly and there's nothing to do but throw the ball. Man, none of the rookies really none of the rookie quarterbacks that started looked great this week. But I got to start with Bo Nix. Man, I almost was buying into the kind of data slicing of, if you remove all of Bo Nix's short passing, he actually was quite a good deep passer. And he did not look like a great deep passer here in week one. That being said, I'm glad that they, Sean Payton wasn't like just running the ball a million times with no success. He was willing to throw the ball. So I'm not like full panicking on Bo Nix. He actually, did some stuff with his legs and looked pretty interesting there. So I think that if you can get to a functional offense, he definitely could develop into something that might be useful for fantasy. But I do think we're a bit of a ways off there. And I don't know. I mean, there were definitely some really bad throws that he made out there. But I think another big part of it is they're out there playing receivers that have no business being like not even on the field, but on a starting 53-man roster. Like, what are they? Yeah. I don't know. I don't really get what Sean Payton is doing with
the personnel plan has been poor. It is. I guess one thing that is interesting for Bo Nix is that his pass rate over expected was -1.5, so kind of neutral. So they were willing, and I think Sean Siegel made this point. They were willing to let him throw, whereas Bryce Young on the other hand, he was -8, and so they were really trying to hide that guy, and so like they're letting Bo Nix figure it out, and so it is at least a little bit hopeful that his expected fantasy points is high. He's getting some rushing, and that if like he is a rookie, so maybe he can have some kind of turnaround. There's a little bit of hope there. I think that's somebody who you could probably play in DFS and stuff like that with like he's going to be low priced. He can be a vomit stack that you can like maybe work something out. It's very gross, but like compared to someone like Bryce Young, Deshaun Watson, Daniel Jones, where they've been playing for a long time and we kind of know who they are, and they're still this bad. I think what I'm trying to say is it's incrementally better than those guys.
Yeah, so we're in agreement. We're leaving a light on for Bo Nix. As far as playing him in DFS, I'm definitely not doing it this next week against the Steelers. But maybe let's look like, what's their week 4 matchup looking like? Give him a little time to marinate. What's he looking like in week 4? Where do we get the Broncos week 4? The Jets, also not great. Maybe week 5? Maybe a little week 5 action. The Raiders, there you go. Broncos, Raiders. Week 5. Go ahead and reserve your Millie Maker lineups for Week 5 right now, and you can go ahead and pencil Bo Nix in there. Play it before you see it. For a guy that at least I am less optimistic on. You mentioned the Panthers, Canales, they're trying to hide Bryce Young. We saw a absolutely putrid rookie season for him, and then just more of the same here. Even after adding Deontay Johnson, like trying to help Bryce Young. Can we just call it over for him? Is it too hasty to say that it's over for Bryce Young?
I think we can. The body is floating out on the wooden casket on the water. We can let go of the flaming arrows.
Yeah, I have an offer to anyone in the chat. If you'd like to buy my Bryce Young best ball teams, they are currently for sale at 90 cents on the dollar. Slide into my DMs.
That's the most expensive they'll be all season.
Yeah, I know. I'm trying to move them now. Man, other guys that looked absolutely atrocious. Deshaun Watson does not look good. Did not. Okay, you want to?
I guess one thing that's I think a little bit interesting to talk about is I feel like Joe Burrow has started every year this would be 3 years running now, and he's in the middle but bottom left quadrant of this chart, and it's like, oh no, we expect Burrow to improve, and he's just hanging around in the middle of the chart. So I'm actually a little bit now concerned about Burrow, and you have the contextual stuff like apparently his wrist is hurting, and Chase held out, so it's going to take them time to get back. T. Higgins had the 17th hamstring strain, it feels like, and then he's like, oh yeah, then there's the tape analysis where, oh yeah, he just gave up on the deep route and dropped his eyes. Maybe he can figure that out, but I'm definitely starting to lose some patience in Burrow, like a lot.
Yeah, the Bengals are just doing poverty franchise stuff, like just not getting a deal done with Chase. Where I just don't understand the teams that kind of drag this stuff out. It just feels like a lose-lose for everyone. You're not going to end up saving any money by dragging it out. Like, if anything, right, you wanted to try and get the deal done before the other big guys reset the market. It really
when inflation is 8%, do it now.
Yeah, it kind of baffles me that they're making the organizational decisions that they are. But yeah, slightly concerned about Burrow. The risk stuff is the most concerning thing to me. I think as far as, like, these guys are professional athletes, they're competitors. Like, Jamar Chase wants to get out there and win football games. T. Higgins wants to get out there and win football games. Joe Burrow wants to win football games. Like,
right. I'm not trying to say that they're gonna quit. It's stuff that isn't great.
No. The vibes are definitely bad. I think I'm willing to think that they can still get it together, but it may be a bit of a slower start than people were hoping for.
Right. You're definitely looking at a slow start.
Yeah. Other guys that were concerning or slow start candidates, man, Caleb Williams, that was a pretty poor looking start. He looked like the classic, guy who's the better athlete than everyone that he plays against in college, and then he gets to the NFL, and all of a sudden all the same old tricks don't work anymore. Like, he's trying to extend plays and get out. I don't know if you saw the play where he's getting pressured
or something.
Tries to do the double turn, and it's just like, this defensive lineman who's running you down is actually faster than you now, so it's not going to work. And I'm not going to say that Caleb is a bust after one game, but what I will say is, it might take a little development, and I think there were a lot of people that were ready to just put the stamp of like, oh, he's going to come into the league and light it on fire. And I think he's got a decent amount of headwind that's going to make that a little challenging for him when you think about, I mean, the Bears play calling looked just as bad as the Seahawks play calling looked last year with Shane Waldron. And so, a leopard does not change its spots. And
Right.
I think I'm unfortunately think that we are in for more of the same.
I'm maybe a little bit more hopeful on Caleb than some of the other guys, just because like he was this like number one overall pick. They do hopefully Odunze comes back soon, but he is on IR. They still do have some pretty strong receivers there. The play calling is concerning. The bad play is concerning, but of all the situations where something could turn around by mid-season, I think that's something where you could get something closer to average by the end.
Yeah, absolutely agree with that. I think that the absolute ceiling outcomes where Caleb comes out and he's
Right.
breaking the rookie passing record, I don't want to say that they are entirely off the table after one game. I think that's a little hasty and kind of
Right.
silly.
Yeah.
I think they're substantially less likely after what we saw from one game. And again, I don't want to put it all on him. Like,
It's going to be a rookie season.
I think the Bears might just be the Bears still. So that's all. Another sophomore quarterback that looked pretty bad is Will Levis here. Man, Will Levis, I mean, I don't really know. I don't know what to do here with, like, say you have Will Levis like on a dynasty team. What do you do? Like, you have to hold him, right? There's nothing you can't trade him for anything really, right?
Yeah, I mean, you have to wait for a better stretch of games for sure. I mean, it's helpful that he has a lot of leash as a starter, like until or unless he gets injured. Like, who are they going to play instead? But when you have the head coach saying, "Oh, I wish we'd just punted every drive instead."
Yeah, that's not great.
That is that's pretty rough. And then you have stuff like DeAndre Hopkins has the knee injury, like Calvin Ridley's the other guy. I think that's not looking or feeling great. You have a little bit of rushing yards there. You got 36 rushing yards, but yeah, that's not a great. And then you have like 1.8 yards adjusted for attempt. Like, that's just catastrophically bad.
Yeah, it's not good. And yeah, the rushing, to me, at least what I saw, looked more like the walls are crumbling. Everything is not working, and it's just pure desperation. The other guy where everything was not working was Kirk Cousins. I'm sure you've seen the clip of him like not wanting to like plant off that foot
Right.
that he's recovering from the Achilles injury on and throw. Like, that was super concerning. Like, and then when you piece
Yeah,
that,
you can't. I mean, you can't play this guy. And I was going to I was gonna bring it up on the kind of skill position sections, but like everything about his play suggests a guy who can't run and who can't throw, where it's just dump off passes to Ray McLeod. I was like, well, there's no way a new coaching staff is going to be like, yeah, well, we tried I don't believe a new coaching staff. Yeah, we hitched our wagon to this guy. Like, we're just going to have 17 games in a row of dump passes to Ray McLeod. I really do think that we're going to see the younger guy, Penix, sooner rather than later, which it is very necessary for those other guys, for the pass catchers, and to some extent Bijan.
yeah, I mean, and that's kind of what I was saying when you now see it on the field, and when you kind of piece the timeline together. Like, the Falcons signed Kirk Cousins without being able to watch him play, right? He was still recovering from the Achilles. He wasn't going out there and throwing and working out for them. They were just signing him with the hope that he would be good. And so when you kind of think of chronologically how things happen, it's like, okay, we signed Kirk Cousins prior to seeing him fully recovered. Kirk Cousins is going through rehab with the team. He's finally getting out there. He's practicing, and the team is thinking like, oh, okay, well maybe we do need to start this rookie quarterback that we drafted high, and maybe that was part of the decision-making process behind drafting Penix at all,
and then resting him in preseason.
Right. So there's
those were some weird decisions that we were like, what are these guys thinking? That
and if you have
people read into, but NFL teams do weird things on such a regular basis that it was hard to read too much into. But their reading of that almost being like the most obvious one looks to be correct.
Yeah. So the breadcrumbs there are concerning. They're leading us down a dark and winding path in the forest, and I do not want to follow the Kirk Cousins breadcrumbs here. If you got him in a redraft league, you're outright cutting him, right? There's no need to clog your roster with him, right?
No, you cut him immediately.
Yeah.
Yeah, immediately. There's no world where you can start Kirk Cousins.
Yeah, and it's like one of those things where it's, to me, I pretend that next week comes and miraculously he looks back to his full self, 100%. Week 1, it was just the jitters, whatever.
Right.
Whatever. But I don't care. I'm not like I didn't lose all that much by cutting Kirk Cousins. Whoever I picked up off waivers is probably close enough to replacing him. And if he really looks that good, I can go back and get him. Maybe it costs me some
when
fat.
we did our main event draft, he went undrafted.
Right.
So in single quarterback leads, he's the most replaceable commodity.
Yeah. A couple guys I wanted to really quickly touch on before we move to the next chart, because we are almost 3/4 of an hour in here, and we are on the first chart. Jayden Daniels looks really fun for fantasy, but not from a passing standpoint, probably not supporting any type of weapon there. It's Jayden Daniels.
It's the Jayden Daniels show.
Yeah, he's the only fantasy asset on the Commanders.
It's like Josh Allen on reverse steroids.
Yes. Wow. That is a really apt comparison. Speaking of, Justin Fields kind of falls into that category as well. I guess for Fields, you just hope. I mean, the volume is going to be absolutely in the gutter low. He graded okay as a passer in PFF grade. I guess you're just hoping that
the team needs Justin Fields rushing to move the ball. That has to be an important part of their offense. So I think you do have that kind of like prototypical floor and ceiling combo from like a cheap. This is old school cheap rushing quarterback.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. So if you have, let's do a quick little waiver wire thing here. I had Kirk Cousins on my redraft team. I cut him. My options are Justin Fields, Geno Smith, and let's see who else would be out there.
So streaming type options.
Yeah.
And the answer is basically while Justin Fields is starting, he's your streamer.
You would do him over Geno Smith.
100%.
What about Justin Herbert? Justin Fields or Justin Herbert?
I probably do Justin Fields still.
Okay.
So Justin Herbert, you're kind of cut from both ways here. So like as a low volume pocket passer, he needs to be really efficient, and then amongst his top receiving options are like Josh Palmer. Like you've got you do have Lad McConkey, and we've high hopes for him, but then you've got like players like QJ. Like it's really hard to get there squeezed on both sides.
We had a good question in the chat before we go to the next chart. Darnold, Carr, or Justin Fields?
Darnold, Carr, or Justin Fields? That's a pretty good question. That's a pretty fun one. I mean, I'm tempted to say Carr. The romantic in me wants to like, yeah, he's just gonna turn his career around and not be and the offense is so good now because I saw that they're using a lot more motion now. They're using a lot more play action. The realist in me says it's probably Justin Fields. But to be fair, you have a much higher chance of Derek Carr starting the full year. I guess it depends on how much that matters to you. But Justin Fields should outproject Carr in any week he's starting. But you also have that chance where they just hug him.
Yeah, I think the last bit on Carr is there could just be a run out where Carr is like a diet Matt Stafford type of quarterback, not quite as talented as Stafford, but going to play in an efficient offense finally for the first time in a long time. And he's actually a pretty capable deep passer, and he has been for his career. So you could end up with that outcome where, like Matt Stafford was good for, 3 or so big games a year and puts up serviceable weeks for the most part in the other weeks with a few duds sprinkled in. I definitely could see that being kind of what we get for Derek Carr here. And even last year, Carr and Stafford were not all that different in their production.
Right.
And so
Carr's an efficient player.
Yeah.
And he or like even in his bad years, he's reasonably efficient. Like,
Yeah.
you're not
So I
going to
would,
get toilet bowl efficiency from Carr.
yeah, Fields is
Some
more
of the stuff
sexy.
where like his volume is good despite a 42% passer rate. And like maybe that becomes a trend this year where like they don't actually throw him that much, they don't throw him, they don't throw that much, but when they do, it's in a really advantageous way. So maybe you're getting like discount Ryan Tannehill.
Yeah.
I can see that. I think that's pretty reasonable.
See, I think if you're out there deciding between Carr and Fields as a streaming option this week, I think both are pretty reasonable. Carr probably has like the higher probability outcome of being good, and Fields has the outcomes where it's like, oh my gosh, this guy's just run, like you unlock the rushing Justin Fields and they start letting him run more, and you're just getting an insane, like a guy that should have been going in the sixth round.
I think he had double digits carries this week. It was like 12 or somewhere between 12 and 15 carries. And like if you have a quarterback that's rushing like double digit times a game who starts all year, like that's very fantasy friendly.
Yeah, you get the high floor, but if the passing volume is not there, the passing efficiency isn't there, the ceiling isn't really there. But he could have a weird
game where he just throws.
Right, you can get the occasional spike weeks. So anyway, let's move on to the running back charts because we're on pace for like a 5-hour show right now.
We love those. Oh no. Oh, now I remember how I figured this out. I eventually figured this out last year. It took me a little bit longer this year.
Yeah, we're just like a lot of the teams, we're knocking the rust off.
I was holding out on Sack all this off season.
we finally got the deal done though.
And so just a reintroduction. So this is our running back snaps and usage chart. And so we've got in the green bar, this is the percentage of team plays that resulted in a rush to this player. So you can see up the top here, you've got Jonathan Taylor near 40%, Bijan near 40%, Jordan Mason near 40%, Joe Mixon near 40%. And then the yellow bar is what percentage of their team plays was a drop back that this player ran a route on. And so you can see that something pretty close to 80% of the Colts plays where Jonathan Taylor was either getting the ball or running the ball, or running a route. And so we want the players up there, and some of the reason that's important is because with very few exceptions, when a running back gets the ball, it's because it's a check down, it's because a play didn't work. The plan A was not like a swing route to Bijan or whatever. It was well, and maybe Bijan is the exception. It's not a swing route to Kyren or Pacheco, but the play they wanted to do wasn't there, and so they're going to that, and the way they can take advantage of that is just by being out there, and so that's kind of like what we like to track here.
Yeah, and we also have pass blocking and run blocking snaps shown there. For the run blocking, you really don't, you're not all that interested in your guy being out there for run blocking snaps. Pass blocking snaps, though, are adjacent to good because it means they're out there.
They show that they trust. It shows they trust this guy to protect their quarterback.
Yep.
Whereas like Josh Jacobs, maybe he only 60%, which was like bell cow adjacent, where rush or a route, but they really trust this guy to pass block for their QB, and so that honestly makes it a little bit worrying on Marshawn Lloyd, that they trust this guy that much to pass to protect Jordan Love, that maybe he's harder to crack than we might have expected.
Yeah, the my initial takeaways on this stuff was a lot of these dead zone running backs, like the Isiah Pachecos, the Joe Mixons, the Josh Jacobs, the Rachaad Whites, Kenneth Walkers, James Cooks. They all got the volume that we were expecting, right? Like they're up here at the top of the chart. Like that's what people were paying for. The bigger question is one that we'll answer when we get to the efficiency charts of, well, it was paying for that volume worth it. At first glance, the guys to me that were a little surprising with how much work they actually got. I expected the Patriots to run the ball a lot, but Rhamondre, they just absolutely were feeding him. I'll be curious to see if he is able to hang on to this amount of work over the whole season, or if Gibson mixes in for a little bit more. But if Rhamondre hangs on to this work the whole season, even if the Patriots are bad, he probably was going a little too late in drafts.
Right. There is a quote unquote dead zone running back that performed relatively well. I know we kind of some of the fear was that Zeke was getting work over him last year, so how good can he be? But he got a lot of usage, and he played relatively well with it. He was kind of neutral on yardage over expected, and then 1.1 touchdowns over points, so 1/6 of a touchdown over expected. So relatively in line with expectations there, and so that I call that an encouraging start.
Yeah, absolutely. Another guy who, zero RB drafters down extremely bad, seeing Saquon Barkley just go absolutely nuclear with some pretty incredible efficiency and a pretty substantial bell cow role. Like, I know that people were concerned that Saquon might lose some snaps to Gainwell or Shipley, and that's certainly something that could still happen over, it's a long season, but he was out there for damn near 80% of snaps.
Right.
Saquon was only off the field 22% of the time. So, the role looks good. Again, it was the Brazil game, so the field was, left a lot to question of, okay, how good was he actually? Was it just defenders were falling down? But to my eyes, he looked pretty good. And that's coming from a guy with like sub 1% Saquon. So how are you feeling about Saquon for this season? Is this what it's going to be for the whole year, or? So
I thought he kind of looked like a savvy veteran running back who has receiving skills. So I think the receiving skills is probably potentially a big differentiator between him and kind of a typical older guy, where he had that touchdown on the wheel route where he was good at getting in bounds, like he was finding gaps where they were there and exploding through it. However, I do not think this is anywhere close to the Saquon of old, where when he had to meet somebody in the hole. I think this makes a big difference. This is a big difference between like the young explosive guys and the older guys. When they have to meet somebody at the hole and beat them, the younger guy, like nobody wins all the time there, but they make a go of it, and sometimes they win and they get through that guy. They make a miss and make an explosive play, whereas that happened a couple of times for Saquon, and it was just very clear that one-on-one he was just not going to beat somebody. And there was, like, even when he had a long run and the safety was there, like, the Saquon of old probably would have ate that guy for dinner. But he tried this little stiff arm and he got tackled. And so the Eagles will certainly take that for as long as it lasts. It is week 1, so I think that's something where we're still. I think the watch is still out there for how long that can last. And I think it can last. It can certainly last a while. I'm skeptical as to how long that lasts. I think that's a sooner rather than later thing.
You're hoping that
when not if.
You're hoping he's following the DeAndre Swift pattern of last year, where he comes out of the gate looking really strong. Is lighting the world on fire.
I think that's kind of like the most likely.
Yeah. Speaking of DeAndre Swift, got the most work by far on the Bears. Was out there 65% of snaps, but man, did he not do anything with it. It was not good. He was, well below his expected fantasy points. He was not efficient. I mean, part of that I think is the Bears and their O-line. But man, for all the work that he got, like, this is why we don't pay for. And he wasn't going, that early. He was in that, Rhamondre Stevenson range. So you didn't have to spend an arm and a leg on him. But this is why these running back profiles got pushed down this year, because, in years past where DeAndre Swift would have been like a 5th, 6th round pick, like that sinks your team right there. If you get 65% snap share, terribly inefficient guy on what's probably not a very good offense, like it's curtains for that pick. That's not a good one.
Right, and you certainly need the offense to be a lot better, because despite him getting this really high snap share, that high snap share equated to like 6 expected points, and he scored 3. So certainly, it's always hard to figure out like how much of that was like this offense was just dog shit, and him not being up to the task. But it's not looking good, because like kind of you need one of them you need him to play a lot better, which as an older running back, starting so in week 1 is poor, or you need a dramatic improvement in the offense.
Yeah. Other roles that I thought were worth highlighting, rumors of Kyren's demise were greatly exaggerated. This guy still has one of the best roles in the league. He still looks exactly like he did last year.
Right.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting a little bit that even after the game, Sean McVay was like, I did not mean to use him that much, and like he somehow did, and like it felt like all of last year they were like, we did not mean to use him that much, but when it gets into the game, they're trying to win. Like, it's, do we put Kyren in? Do we put Ronnie Rivers in? Like, Blake Corum not even in consideration there right now. It does seem like that coaching tendency up to rely on one guy that he trusts is holding pretty strong right there.
Yeah, I mean, just like he did not mean to use Kyren that much, every night I don't mean to eat as much dessert as I do. I do. And every night I say the same thing. And so,
I'm going on a diet tomorrow.
yeah, exactly. So I'll believe it when I see it, is what I'm saying. Kyren is not a guy that I want to like try and get out ahead of the market and sell him at his peak or something in a redraft league right now. Like, I think you just ride it till the wheels fall off. If you're going to get this role, you play it, you know.
Right.
Other roles that I thought were worth mentioning. James Cook, really solid role. Would have been incredible if Josh Allen didn't eat all the touchdowns for himself. Travis Etienne, still
Do you think Josh Allen getting all the touchdowns is kind of like that's kind of a feature though, where he scores touchdowns for them.
Yeah, no, it is. It's the James Cook usage and the way that the game played out for the Bills was both encouraging in that James Cook looked really good. He got a lot of the work. And it was also very concerning where it's like, am I really about to watch this guy who, I mean, if he just got if he had any quarterback other than Josh Allen and pretend that magically didn't negatively impact the offense, he'd be a top, probably top 6, top 7 running back in the league, if he's getting the touchdowns for fantasy. But I'm definitely worried that, like you said, it's a feature, not a bug.
So, and just looking at the data here, I took another look. So he had 4.4 expected touchdown, 4.4 expected points from touchdown. So like 2/3 of an expected touchdown, and he didn't get it. And so I think that's at least when you're considering it as like a small small number statistic, where like at least you're getting some touchdown equity there. It's not like last year where it was like they'd sub in Damian Harris or they sub in
Latavius Murray.
Yeah. So at least he's getting usage there. I mean, if he continues to not convert, then you're highly concerned. But at I guess 16.5 expected points a game, that's like that feels solid, especially for where he was going.
Yeah, to me, that I kind of am reading this as a spot that I might want to attack before other people see it, because he was able to stay relatively under the radar in fantasy because he didn't have a huge game, right? People don't,
right?
You're not going to see it in the box score that he put up some monster fantasy week. His matchup next week is the Texans, which they've got a pretty good rush defense. So I don't know if that's the greatest spot to attack. I also don't know if it matters all that much for James Cook, because he can, he's going to be active in all phases of the game. He can beat you in the passing game and in the rushing game. And I think the Bills should be able to hang with the Texans and score some points. So, oh no, I'm sorry. That's week 5. I was all the way down where we're playing Bo Nix. I lied. It's the Dolphins. It's the Dolphins. So, yeah, I mean, that could certainly be a fun shootout here on this Thursday night. Maybe I'll be looking at trying to play a little more James Cook in showdown here.
Yeah, and just looking at his if you're talking about he's not terribly expensive for a slate where there's only 4 starting running backs. He is the 3rd running back. He goes after Joe Mixon, after Achane, who might not even play, and then in between Nico and Steph Diggs. So like that's something where you could certainly get something where he completely outscores Mixon, Achane, and Swift. That feels like something where you could get something. You could get a big hit.
Yeah, other roles I wanted to touch on before you go to the next chart. JK Dobbins looked like the far superior running back. Man, Gus Edwards, we're gonna rebrand to Dust Deadwards. It's, I mean, I already thought it was over for that guy last year, and then he just managed to, by last man standing rules, he ate up a bunch of points on a really good Ravens offense through just 1,000,001 touchdowns. But he looks not good. And JK Dobbins, for a man with only one leg, looked pretty good. The long speed was definitely not there. He got caught from behind twice. I think I made a joke in our stat chasing chat that JK Dobbins almost hit 15 miles an hour on his run. I did sell him short, though. I saw the GPS data had him over 19 miles an hour. Pretty good for a guy with only one.
And I think that the contextual thing there was like 19 is actually kind of slow for a full sprint chase to the end zone. That's still like slower than you'd want on long speed. But him like on like what could be a pretty effective Chargers rushing attack, he can, like, especially at his price and where he was going, you can certainly get some effective days like this.
Yeah, you may not need the home run plays when the dude just keeps hitting doubles and triples, right?
Right.
So I think Dobbins is a pretty clear buy. He was definitely a guy that I tried to adjust on in best ball after we knew he was making the team. I attacked him pretty heavily and stopped taking Dust Edwards very much. So I'm glad I did that. I wish I had been willing to buy JK Dobbins earlier in the offseason, but I don't think that was a big process mistake given that he was coming off the Achilles.
And they're playing the Panthers this week.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, wow. I mean, it's a little unfortunate that he nuked so hard in week 1, because I feel like people are just going to, you're going to look at the box score and then you're going to see the Panthers matchup. I mean, he's an early candidate for huge steam, right? Like, he's got to come in super chalky this week.
Right. He'll be popular. Just looking at Dog Bowl stuff, he's ADP of 29.6, which looks like a decent amount of cheaper running backs. But that certainly looks interesting.
Okay, you want the really way too early DFS slate alpha here. So the Chargers are a 10 o'clock game. I'm assuming Dobbins is going to get steamed to high heavens. I haven't looked at salaries at all yet, but I assume he's going to come in with some decent ownership. You play the Chargers' budding wide receiver 1, Ladd McConkey, and get the leverage off of JK Dobbins, and you do it in the morning game so you have the information to know if you can just jam the chalk after Ladd goes, 13 receptions for 112 yards and a touchdown for you in a vintage Keenan Allen-esque performance.
That I just to be clear, you're assuming the high ownership based on the usage, based on the matchup.
Yeah, based on the usage and
kind of
the box score and the matchup this week, yeah.
But it's contingent on a very chalky high ownership.
Yes, yeah. Any other role? Oh, David Montgomery, Jahmyr Gibbs. So the slightly annoying thing for Gibbs is Montgomery's still going to be super involved, it looks like, just like last year. A big part of the bet on Jahmyr Gibbs was that you hoped that he would take more of the work from Montgomery as the season goes. He's just, it's undeniable that he's the more explosive back. They got to get him on the field. I think that if you ask Detroit right now, like, how they envision the running back workload being in week 17, they would tell you just like we had it. Like, that was what we want to do. Like, we've got the lightning.
Right. Well, I mean, it looks like what you're getting here is you're getting a close to, and the expected points of on rushing might be skewed here, because Montgomery did get a lot more carries. Gibbs had pretty close in terms of expected rushing points, but then he ran a ton more routes. Like, he is going to get all of the he is probably going to get all of the receiving stuff, and then maybe 40% of the rushing.
Yeah, there's a reason Gibbs went much earlier in drafts, right? It's because
Right.
he's going to monopolize a lot of those high value touches. But David Montgomery is definitely not going to be without high value touches. So I think Montgomery was, man, the more I think about it, Montgomery was such a good click because the contingent value is so incredible. If Jahmyr Gibbs is down, pretend that we knew Jahmyr Gibbs was missing the rest of the season. Where would you draft David Montgomery then?
You were asking the wrong guy. I want to say he's still in the Josh Jacobs. He's probably Josh Jacobs ish, like fifth round.
I'm like 2-3 turn because the Lions will give the running back 30 carries in a game. Like they don't care, and they'll use him in the passing game. When Gibbs was out last year, he was pretty involved as a receiver. Like he's a very capable do-it-all back, and he's a high success rate guy running behind the best offensive line in football. Like I think that the market majorly mispriced Montgomery. I mean, I guess
Is a lot of that not true for Josh Jacobs?
I don't think that Josh Jacobs is as good as David Montgomery, and I don't think the line he's running behind is anywhere near as good as the Lions. Like the Lions' offensive line is like elite. They're like 2 years ago or 3 years ago Browns when Nick Chubb was just like absolutely melting faces, or like 3 years ago Titans when Derrick Henry was just absolutely stomping a mud hole through teams. Like the Lions' offensive line is insane. They look really good. Like that overtime drive when they were just like, by the way, we'd like to win the game now. We're going to run down your throat was pretty, I mean, that was pretty convincing to me. It's like, oh yeah, we can just exert our will on you if we'd like to do that. And we choose to do so right now. Thank you very much.
I still think I'm like I prefaced with I'm a David Montgomery hater, but how would I guess the question would be, knowing what we know today, what is there a way to play that, or is it just like if we get a week where we know Gibbs is out, even if Montgomery's chalky, you think he's likely underowned still?
I think the easiest way to play it in like the format that I could think of where it would be the easiest is in like dog bowl drafts. If you end up where Gibbs is drafted 100% of the time and Montgomery is not drafted, I think that there will be way more weeks this year where Montgomery and Gibbs score within a few points of each other than there will be where one gaps the other substantially. Right. And so I think that
you need to get the week where Montgomery just gaps.
Right. You need you're praying for the touchdown variance where Montgomery ends up being the guy that gets the goal line carries. Right. Whether it's because Gibbs breaks off
random goal line carries.
Gibbs runs a 60-yard run, gets taken down at the 2, and he's gassed, and Montgomery taps in and steals the touchdown. Which the Lions sure do like their David Montgomery runs from short yardage. Now they didn't take Gibbs off the field in short yardage stuff, so like it's very, the market wasn't wrong in that Gibbs should be going early. He definitely should have gone where he was going. I just think that we might have been not fully factoring in how incredible the contingent value was for David Montgomery, because he's going to pay off his tag with no contingency needed. Like he's going to be just fine for where he was going in drafts without anything bad happening to Gibbs. And then you get the absolute league-winning upside if Gibbs goes down. So that was really all I wanted to say about Montgomery.
Okay, sounds like I got us talking more on David Montgomery.
Anyone else that you wanted to touch on this?
Yeah. So the other piece here that's worth noting, and I don't think this is a surprise to anyone who watched the game, Pacheco still very much up here in the in the bell cow section of the chart, and then we see that Pirine didn't actually even make the chart. And so that's one where you have a bias to like, well, he did just join the team a week before, and it's interesting that he still had like 8 routes. P. Ryan still had 8 routes, where when he has actually a chance to learn the playbook, then he should cut into Kyren stuff more. But it's still something that's interesting that they were still perfectly happy to give Pacheco something along the lines of 80% of snaps in like a pretty crucial game for them.
Yeah, I mean, Pacheco to me reads like he's the classic dead zone back where he's going to get a lot of the work. I think we see his role shrink a little bit as you get P. Ryan more integrated with the team. To me, watching that Chiefs game and not having a ton of Pacheco, I felt fantastic about that because I'm sitting there thinking like there's just no way that this guy buries me. Like he could be a neutral advance rate pick, which is fine. I don't see a way where he's like doubling up on expected advance rate or anything like that.
Right. Especially at the 2-3 turn.
Yeah. It's so. That was the Pacheco faders can breathe a sigh of relief because I think that we saw his role at its absolute peak, and it's only going to diminish a little. I'm not saying like he's going to lose 40% of snaps to P. Ryan, but like
the risk is to the downside there.
Yeah, and if P. Ryan just does what he did last year on the Broncos, like
right,
it's not like P. Ryan was a world beater for fantasy. But he sure sucked a lot of the life out of the backfield. Like you were really upset that P. Ryan was taking those 3 to 8 points a week.
Right.
You would love those to go to the running back that you're starting.
And I think that's a pretty fair way to put it. Where Pacheco, a lot of what we're seeing on this chart here, was priced in this offseason. It looks like it's still priced in dog bowl stuff, and we're pretty confident. We don't know how much P. Ryan cuts in, but we're pretty confident he does cut in, and so there's downside there. You just you don't know how much, and that's kind of like an asymmetric downside, like textbook asymmetric downside.
Yep. Yeah. Very well put. Anyone else, or should we move on to the backups running back chart?
Yeah, I think I think we can move on here.
Man, there were a couple guys that showed up on this chart that were a little surprising to me. I mean, Javonte was one that was almost the most surprising to me. I mean, I fully expected Sean Payton to use a split backfield. I just really thought that Javonte would get more. I really thought he would be closer to like a 60% guy. So that was surprising to me. I mean, Jaleel was he's like already nipping at his heels for snaps, and they involved Estime in the first game. Now, granted, Estime put the ball on the ground. Like he definitely looked like he was trying to get into the doghouse. But I mean, I think
he's on the field less than half the snaps.
Yeah.
So he has a plurality on the snap share, but it's he does not have a majority, and so I think it's a bit interesting that ordinarily it's high expected points for the Broncos backfield, and you had a week where the Broncos just were way under their expected points, and just because they played bad. But if you look at some of the stuff, like Jaleel had actually, despite being on the field less, he had 11.6 expected points, because he had the passing yardage, the passing stuff. That I mean, maybe it's one of those things where it's like a backfield where they're gonna ping pong, like and who knows if you get a week where the Broncos play well, and like they did even with Russell Wilson last year, they had weeks where they were rolling. So I think I don't want to overreact and say they're not going to be in any positive game scripts, you should get more Javonte there, and less Jaleel, but this could really easily open up to be like something like a 40, 20 by the end of the year.
Yeah.
So you need a really, really high amount of expected points from running backs, and you're not there. You weren't there this week.
Yeah, and if you look at the snaps that are useful for fantasy for these guys, Javonte had 38% useful snaps for fantasy. That's rush attempts and routes, and Jaleel had 33. So it's really just a couple plays difference for these guys. So
and like just 20 expected points for the entire backfield.
Yeah, I think
that isn't what we were promised.
Yeah, better days are coming. Yeah. Another guy who had decent expected points here. This is like the prototypical 0 RB Band-Aid. This is like what you do when your running back room is just not scoring any points and you're panicking while you're waiting for Jonathan Brooks to come back to the Panthers so he can score no points for that putrid offense. But Justice Hill looks like he is going to be very involved. He played more snaps than Derrick Henry. He's very, very involved as a pass catcher for them. I love his little bar here where he has just one rushing attempt and then he's got all the routes. So he's getting all the high value touches. Now, part of that is the game script that the Ravens were in, where they were behind. They had to throw a ton, had 70% pass plays. But I think, and the nice thing about Justice Hill is that we already saw last year, like, what does the nut outcome look like for Justice Hill? We got that scenario-wise. We got that scenario last year, and he never really turns into anything extraordinary for fantasy. So you're kind of capped on the ceiling. The Ravens will not, and Justice Hill cannot, handle like an enormous workload. That's just not going to happen for you. But he can go out there and be just he's an innings eater for you. He can go out there and get you 6 to 8 fantasy points in a week, so you're not just hemorrhaging points at your RB2 spot. So he's definitely an interesting one if you're really down bad for running back.
By the way, so I'm just now noticing I was in the weeds on all the stats. That we got a couple of comments in that I'm not loud. Are you having any issues hearing me?
You sound good now, but if anyone in the chat is still having trouble hearing Drico, just let us know.
Yeah, I appreciate those comments, and apologies I didn't see them sooner.
But yeah, Justice Hill, solid innings eater. Zeke Elliott was
one of those
okay.
Funny. I was reading those comments because Nick in the private chat said I should read those comments, and I missed who you're talking about, and then I heard 6 to 8 points every week, and I'm like, he's talking about Justice Hill.
We had talked about this when doing best ball rankings this summer of if there was a player that you knew was guaranteed for 8 and exactly 8 points every week, where would you draft him? And we joked about how what are you talking about? That's just Justice Hill. And sure enough, week 1 comes, and my God, that's Justice Hill. So the ceiling is absolutely
just to I think it's an important note though. He's like a disproportionate beneficiary of a negative game script for the Ravens.
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
They're not. He's not gonna get. He's not gonna get this type of snap share in most weeks. It's probably going to be in the 30% range, but he is a trusted back for them, and that is helpful. Like having those like late round veterans who can fill in your points while your rookies are in healthy scratches is valuable.
Yeah. Zeke Elliott, another guy that people were using to kind of be that innings eater early on. And in week 1, I mean, it was going to be not pretty, but it got salvaged with a rushing touchdown. Do you think that Zeke is the kind of back you can be using to kind of plug a roster hole while you're waiting for something better to happen? Or
yeah, he is. If you've already drafted him, I'm sorry. But this is why you drafted him. Early season points while you're waiting for your younger guys to come on. Like I think it's important that there's this big price discount between Zeke and Justice, where like you're kind of using them the same, and then one cost you paid premium brand for Zeke.
Yeah, name brand innings eater for Zeke.
Right. But yeah, I think that's pretty reasonable.
Okay, I've got a fun one for you. Talk to me about Derrick Henry and why was he the worst click you could possibly have made during draft season?
Yeah, it's a pretty bad outcome for him in week 1, where they did have the negative game script, and then they were just clearly happy with Justice Hill on the passing downs a lot more. I think obviously week 1 is like that's probably the low candlestick mark for him, for Derrick Henry. On the weeks where they do have the positive game scripts, you're gonna get very, very good Gus Edwards, probably.
Yes. Yep.
But the second round, third round stuff, like when you think about what you need from the second and third round, you need somebody that, if they're not legendary season, that they can threaten it. I think you are getting unfortunately, you're getting the true sort of dead zone profile here.
You're drawing dead from legendary season.
Maybe not profile. You're getting the silent killer. The silent killer profile.
Yeah, he's not going to be getting the 4 targets per game. Like that's just not. He's not going to be that involved with the passing game, and so then you're just, like you said, you're getting good Gus Edwards. Here's the problem with good Gus Edwards, though. So much of the Gus Edwards value came from rushing touchdowns. Like the extra yardage you're going to get from Henry because he's better than Gus Edwards is like cool. I'm happy that I'm getting the extra yardage, but it's not worth the premium that you're having to pay for it, because the touchdowns are more a function of the team than anything. Like the touchdowns are happening because the Ravens offense is good and they're going to get you in scoring position. And Derrick Henry, Gus Edwards, they're probably both punching in. Like if you made me bet on one over the other, absolutely. I'm taking Derrick Henry to punch in the 1 yard rushing touchdown over Gus Edwards every time. But
let's put it another way. So this week, dog bowl stuff, Kyren pick 14, Derrick Henry pick 15, Pacheco 15.7, Gibbs 18.7, Josh Jacobs 28.6, and so on. The types of backs that he's going around, like you feel way better about betting on a mega week from Kyren. Now, granted, he's like 0.7 picks higher, and probably that'll probably diverge. But even Pacheco, you'd much rather Pacheco than Derrick Henry.
The nice thing I can say about Henry this week is he's playing against the Raiders. But like, I think rest of season, if you made me pick, I would probably take David Montgomery over Derrick Henry straight up for the rest of the season. Total points.
I think, honestly, as sad as it is, I think that's pretty reasonable. But even playing the Raiders, like you're hoping that it's Derrick Henry who gets those points.
Right.
Like
it can't be Lamar. Yeah.
And then they're up so much, and they're like, oh yeah, let's play this other guy.
Right. Yeah. We don't need to put any load on Derrick Henry. We're beating the brakes off.
We didn't sign him to give him 30 carries a game.
Right. Exactly. And so that's the concerning thing about Henry. I mean, if you're in a redraft league and you have Henry, the move is you wait till he's going to have a monster game. What we're not saying is that Derrick Henry's never going to score any fantasy points ever again. But it's just going to be few and far between when he has those absolutely nuclear games. And then what you're getting in between is you're just getting stuff that you could have gotten 6 rounds later, and so it's just really it's not worth it. And so you're waiting for a big game and you're trying to trade him. You're trying to, get the vintage big dog game and then move him off that. One other guy here that I wanted to talk about, Brian Robinson. He looked decent. Austin Ekeler also looked pretty good. I think really what you have here is if there were going to be players that you wanted to have on Washington outside of Jayden Daniels, it's probably Brian Robinson. But he's just he's the plus version of the backs that are on this page. He's definitely if I had to start anyone on this page, it's probably Derrick Henry or Brian Robinson over the rest of the guys.
Right.
Actually, that's a good question. Who do you want, Derrick Henry or Brian Robinson rest of the season?
I mean, that is Derrick Henry.
It is Henry. I agree. I
think you got a kick out of asking that. But yeah. What's interesting about Brian Robinson is that despite the low-ish committee style split or snap share, he did get a lot of expected points. He's clearly their preferred rusher, and then in terms of routes or expected receiving, he was pretty close to Austin Ekeler in expected, even though he was less in routes, and I think he was pretty close in pass blocking, less in routes, and then close in expected points. So I think it will be interesting to see if that one's tricky, where the expected points were actually really good for Brian Robinson, and people were like, wow, it's just Brian Robinson, but then you look at the snap share, it's pretty close. That maybe the points outcomes this week are not reflective of what we'll see going forward, and it'll be closer to a 50-50 split.
Yeah, I definitely want to see how this plays out over the season. I do think it's going to lean Robinson pretty confidently over Ekeler. He really looks just like the satellite back in the offense, but he did not look bad in the role that he was used in. But he's not really fantasy relevant for me. In any managed league, if you're down to having to start Austin Ekeler, something's gone. It's the same thing as having to start Justice Hill. Something's gone terribly wrong.
That's fair.
We've got two more running back charts to go through that I think are a little bit more illuminating than just the snaps and usage. Is there anyone else that you wanted to touch on here before we get into the expected points charts?
I mean, I guess it's worth mentioning here that Zach Charbonnet was a lot closer to what we would have expected in terms of snap share early in the summer, before we heard all of the it's Kenneth Walker season. Kenneth Walker did get injured in the fourth quarter, so maybe that's helping boost some of this. But this still seems pretty positive in terms of he was in free fall, so that is positive. And then Bucky Irving is certainly on watch list after he played much better than Rachaad White.
He looked a lot better too, and I don't think you need to be
the carries where he was running the daylight. He saw the hole and he was just taking it, zero hesitation.
Yeah, you do not need to be a particularly sophisticated film watcher to go and side by side compare a Rachaad White carry to a Bucky Irving carry and tell me which guy you want to give the ball to more.
and I think that's an interesting one. It was how would you play that? Are you starting Bucky Irving this week if you have him on a 0B squad?
That heavily depends on how bad my 0 RB room is, right?
You just start. It's Bucky Irving or Justice Hill.
Ooh.
Where it's 8 points. You think maybe 6 points from Justice Hill, or
I think I want to roll the dice with Bucky and see if I can catch. I want to see if I can catch it before I have to see it with Bucky, because he looked good enough that
right.
It's one of those players where he might just be good enough that there's a week where it happens and then they can't look back. The genie's out of the bottle, you know?
Yeah.
And Rachaad White is now being
He certainly
relegated.
flashed that.
Yeah. So that's Bucky Irving is interesting. If you got a big bag of Bucky Irving, you got to be feeling good right now. I know that was one of Gretsch's highest owned players overall. And I had a good amount of Bucky Irving, not as much as Gretsch, but that one's looking like it's going to age pretty well.
Yeah, I agree. But not starting. You're not starting him in like DFS. You're not playing him in DFS.
No.
Underdog. Because you don't need to go there.
Yeah.
And so this is our running back expected fantasy points and efficiency chart. We have on the horizontal axis, we have rushing expected points. On the receiving axis, on the vertical axis, we have receiving. And then Zach has these like kind of like jotted lines that go to help you visualize where they are in terms of total expected points, and you have the nice little labels that help you there, and then I guess one other note, because we get questions on this all the time. People are like, oh, so and so isn't on the chart. And Zach, do you want to explain how you kind of like divvy up this between these two charts?
Yeah, go ahead and zoom us in a little bit while I explain it. So there are so many running backs that would be on this chart if it were just one chart, that it would get really difficult to read. So we split the running backs into two charts here, and they're not split by anything that would be super easy for you to intuit who is on which chart. They're literally ordered from top to bottom from expected fantasy points, and then split odd, even. So the first guy and the third guy and the fifth guy and the seventh guy all go on one chart. The second, fourth, sixth, and eighth guy, all ranked by expected fantasy points, go on the other chart. And that's just to help spread them out more evenly for where they would fall on the chart, so we don't get a bunch of guys randomly clustered together, or try to avoid it as best as we can.
That makes sense. And I just going back on the comments here, we had a question here about Blake Corum. Are we holding any hope? I agree with historical anomalies here that it's too you can't drop a day two running back after he didn't play, or he barely played in week one. We could still see something there. But definitely, given the lack of strength in that running back chart, him not playing at all, definitely concerning.
Yeah, I mean, the vast majority of the price you paid on Corum, though, was for the contingent value. So dropping him after 1 week kind of defeats. If you're going to do that, you just should never have drafted him, right?
Right. We saw a bunch of rookie running backs that were either healthy scratches, like Jaylen Wright, or didn't really play that much.
Yeah.
But it was concerning. Definitely not, like you said, definitely not cutting him. But want to see him make some kind of inroad this year. Can't hold him the whole season.
Yeah. So for this chart, the expected fantasy points and efficiency chart, the easy way to read it is, if you're the higher up you are in the band of expected fantasy points, the more opportunity you're getting. And then the larger your dot or your data point, the more efficient you're being with what you're given. And so you can see that pink dot over there in that last band, the 20 plus expected fantasy points. That is just a reference for size. That's 0 fantasy points over expected per game. So running backs that are that size are getting exactly what we expect of them. Guys that are larger than that are scoring above expectation, and guys that are smaller than that are scoring below expectation. One note about fantasy points over expected is touchdowns can do some wonky stuff to it. So if you got a goal line carry, you punching in that touchdown or that goal line carry is probabilistic in nature. It's not, you're not going to score a touchdown 100% of the time when you run from the 1 yard line. So you have some expected fantasy points smaller than 6 as your expectation there. And so when you score, you're over expectation by whatever your probability was of punching it in.
Or if you get a touchdown from 15 yards out.
Right. Yeah. Or if you get multiple carries from the one and fail to punch a couple in, you're going to go under expectation on that simply because you got stuffed. So just wanting to explain that so we're not like, oh, big dot good, little dot bad. Sometimes there's a little more nuance to it. But just, if you're wanting to get a quick glimpse of who is efficient, who is inefficient, the size of the dots can help out there.
So one thing they are both on the chart here, where we have Najee, who had a pretty healthy above 15 expected points this week, and then Jaylen Warren, who we actually didn't mention because he didn't play enough snaps to make it onto the last chart. I think we're not medical people, don't want to speculate on the medical stuff. Do you think there's some chance that they're winning him off or they're winning him back from the hamstring injury? Go ahead.
Yeah, Tomlin said, when it comes to that, it's a slippery slope, talking about Jaylen Warren's hamstring injury. So it seems like they're just trying to be cautious with it. And, I don't know if we can read too much into that with them being cautious with Russell Wilson's injury too and not playing him, if maybe their medical staff.
Are you saying he made some comment that
yes,
they're being cautious?
Yeah, when asked about Jaylen Warren's hamstring, he said something to the effect of hamstring injuries are a slippery slope, implying that, he didn't want to be risking Warren's health out there.
Right.
So, I'm not panicking yet on Jaylen Warren, although it is, it's week 1, it's fantasy football, been drafted all summer. It's a little fun to just panic for fun. Even though I know that there's nothing that I'm actually like, if I were making decisions based on this, I'm not like, oh my gosh, Jaylen Warren is substantially worse than he was just a couple weeks ago from this 1 week of usage off of a hamstring injury. But it can be fun to pretend the sky is falling for your most drafted player. So
doesn't sound like my idea of fun.
Well, I'm a twisted individual.
And then some of the stuff for Najee was really bad. Like he had just 26%. Just using the next gen stats, just 26% of his runs were above what was expected. So he played bad. And with the offense not playing the best either, and then him being minus 4.2 points on expected points below on touchdowns, so not converting on goal line stuff. There's definitely room to leave a light on there.
Yeah, he also, I mean, not converting on the touchdown, like, yeah, of course you would want to see like this huge like bruiser back, like that's the thing that you're hoping that he does, but I'm not so overly concerned about that.
Right. If it was a player we liked, we would say, oh, it's just variance.
Right. What's not great though is
he was also bad. He was also bad on just normal rushing stuff.
That's what I was going to get to. He wasn't efficient as a rusher either. So, I want to wait and see what's happening with the Steelers' backfield. The Cordero Patterson stuff is frustrating too. That like we're giving Cordero Patterson carries in the year of our Lord 2024, but I mean that's just Arthur Smith is going to Arthur Smith. So.
Yeah, and I guess if you look at it, 9% of the plays was either a route or a rush attempt for Cordero Patterson, which to me, I guess that's just a little bit above what you might expect from an RB3. But when it's a sluggish day for the offense and Warren is not getting what we want, that stuff does not help. It's very frustrating.
Right. Going to the opposite end of the spectrum as far as efficiency, Aaron Jones was pretty darn efficient. He looked good. He looked like vintage Aaron Jones. He was above expectation on his yardage. He converted a touchdown, which he was above expectation on that, but he also was above expectation, almost 4 yards over expected on his yardage, or 4 fantasy points, excuse me. So almost 3 yards over expected. That's really good. So yeah, Aaron Jones looks great. Definitely looking like a win where he was drafted with how much opportunity he got, and the efficiency still being there for him. Other guys that are in this band of 10 to 15 fantasy points, David Montgomery, like we talked about, where David Montgomery doing the vast majority of his through his expected rushing points. You can see he's not high up on the y-axis at all there. Aaron Jones with a little bit more balance. Also, we'd be remiss if we didn't mention your favorite player, Devin Singletary, hanging out here also in this 10 to 15 expected fantasy point band. Singletary doing it less efficiently than Aaron Jones, but Singletary just has the role. He is getting the work. Tyrone Tracy did get on the field a little bit, but Singletary just looks like he's doing what he's done in every other backfield, where he just absorbs all the work, and he doesn't have to be particularly efficient with it. It's just coming from volume.
Yeah, and I think you have to hope for better days for that offense. You really do. But getting something like Singletary, where he's getting that kind of workhorse type, well, not quite workhorse, but close to workhorse role, and you're getting at the price that you did, you talk about innings eater, like that is a great innings eater.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
Just on Aaron Jones, you can kind of see with the bubble here, but he really did play phenomenal, like 40 yards over expected, like 65% of his rushing went of his rushing plays, he went above the expectation for. So he really did have a phenomenal day. And then I saw something that he never saw 8 defenders in the box, which that's to go above expectation when there's less than 80 or 8 there's never 8 defenders in the boxes. That's pretty phenomenal day.
Yeah, definitely. You got to be feeling good if you got Aaron Jones on your team, and he seems like a very viable guy that you would be happy to play in DFS or happy to play in Battle Royale. Just if he's ever getting underpriced, due to he's not like the shiny hot young thing or anything. Like, he's definitely a guy that you could attack if he's not correctly priced. But guys that we're really excited about that are also very efficient. Devon Achane getting nearly 12 expected receiving fantasy points. That is pretty incredible. He looks like we probably should have been drafting him at the 1-2 turn with the role that he has. Like,
yeah, a little bit of concern where I think there's speculation of like a mild high ankle sprain, and it sounds questionable as if he'll play on Thursday with the short week. A little bit of concern there with the injury, but the role is awesome.
Yeah, we definitely.
And then I think the other thing as well, they talked about using him as like the de facto third receiver. It really felt like they were.
They did, yeah. It was not just talk. They were lining him up out wide, and like they were just designing ways to get him the ball in space, like these little, just all right. We're just going to throw a quick little screen to Achane. He's lined up out wide, and good luck. Let's see how it plays out.
Let's see how that works.
We're going to get one of the fastest guys in the league the ball, and we'll just see how it goes. another guy with absolutely elite receiving role, Jahmyr Gibbs. This is an area where last year we were a little disappointed in the amount of receiving work he got, where that was really what he was highlighted for coming into the league. Lots of people projecting that he was going to be this incredible receiving back, getting a lot of expected receiving fantasy points here. Just honestly, just hoping to see that trend continue. Thoughts on if this is going to be sticky, or will he get back a little closer to where he was last season?
Well, I mean, it's kind of showing up in the routes where he's their passing down back, and it is a valuable offense to be that in with Goff. I'm trying to find here because like one of the knocks. One of the knocks on Gibbs has kind of been that he's not really a receiving back. He's a back that you can throw the ball to, and then he can turn that into a run play. And so it was like minus a half a yard. So basically, he was targeted at the line of scrimmage. So that part has kind of held up. He's going to catch screen passes. He's not running routes down the field. But his just to go back to if you don't mind, his if you can see, where is he here?
He's down near the bottom, third from the bottom.
Yeah, him getting this huge route share, that makes me think that it's pretty sticky.
Okay.
I guess the other pieces though, and I'm sorry, the other pieces they did run a lot of plays, so even though his share is good, the total expected points from receiving probably will come down a bit just because they won't run that many plays every week.
I think we can probably say the same thing about Jerome Ford, where his receiving expected points are almost certainly going to come down. I think a pretty big part of that was a function of them just being very behind all day, and also they were not able to stop the pass rush from Dallas, so they just needed to get the ball out quickly. And then you get the David Njoku injury, and he was normally operating as their short yardage check down type of guy, and he gets injured, and so Ford just kind of cleans up there. They didn't. It was not a functional offense that they were running in Cleveland, and so Ford was the benefactor of that. Where it was like, well, go try and do something, bud. We got to get it out quick. So
I mean, he had a 64% route share, but they also had 56 dropbacks.
Yeah.
So he's certainly the passing down back. He's very firmly the passing down back, but it's like misleading in the high expected points thing, where it's only shows up as high because they were so bad, whereas if they actually played well, if this team was efficient, the volume would be much lower.
Right. What do you think about Alexander Mattison here? He, a relatively efficient day, above expected, but not too many expected points. He's
already a great zero RB pick for where you took him, where getting to use his week 1 score is going to help you a lot. And then the question becomes, I think the most interesting way to frame the question on Mattison is, are you starting him over Justice Hill, where Justice Hill is our bogey of are you foregoing the comfortability of 6 to 8 points for what this guy can give you, because you're not playing him in DFS, you're not playing him any of that stuff, and to me that question is kind of like, well, he's not. So I guess he's 47% of the team's useful kind of like snaps. So route share and rush attempts. So 8% was rush attempt, 39% was route share, and then you have 6 He is 10 expected points, 6 fantasy points over expected, and so can he be a 12 point a week guy for this team? And I think you can. I think that sounds about right. I think you probably do start somebody like Mattison over Justice Hill, because right now you do have that concern about Justice Hill's floor, where in the weeks where they boat race somebody, he's not going to be on the field a lot, and then they show their intentions with, hey, we actually we see Mattison as a better back. We want him running most of the routes. With it being not the best team in the Raiders, that seems helpful.
Yeah, I mean, I think at this point you're probably just doing Mattison over Justice Hill, because I think that
39% of the plays were routes with him, to 16% for Jahmyr White. So he is the passing down back for the Raiders right now.
Yeah.
So, and then even though the rush attempts were a little bit lower, I think it's the Raiders receiving back that you want. It's not the rushing back.
Right. Let's see. Anyone else on this chart?
Yeah. So the oh my God, I forgot. I'm actually forgetting now. The one thing that people I think the one development of this week was Jacksonville. So ETN, he had the bad fumble. Tank Bigsby, he played this kind of like low snap share, but when he played, he got the ball, and then when he got the ball, he was actually pretty efficient with it. Like his next gen stat stuff was good. His fantasy points over expected from rushing was good, and so that's something where, you know, you compare the profiles of a back like ETN to one of Tank Bigsby. Like ETN's caliber is much higher, but then you have this high profile mistake, and then the other guy plays well. I think that is something to kind of watch out for, of like how comfortable do they feel giving turning that into closer to a 50-50 split. I still my bias would be that something like that can't really last that long, but and I don't know if I'm starting Tank Bigsby yet, but I definitely think that's something to watch.
Yeah, the Tank Bigsby was definitely an interesting one because he was so clearly not ready last season. Like he wasn't just bad last year. Like it was harmful when he was the Kadarius Toney of running backs last year. You know, like when Tank Bigsby was on the field, it made the team a lot more likely to lose the game. So that was bad. Most teams don't want to play with players like that. And the Jaguars stopped doing that after they realized that was what it was. They stopped. But then this offseason, we got all this talk about like, oh, they're really excited, feel good about Tank Bigsby. I'm wondering if the low snap share stuff is more a factor or like a feature of he's not really that complete a player. Like he's not able to do very much well. But
so
they
he doesn't have any pass blocking snaps.
Right.
All the pass blocking was ETN.
They at least feel like he's not going to, because last year he was like just could not succeed on a run, you know, like so, but now they feel comfortable enough that he's able to spell ETN and give him a breather. Right. So, I mean, he certainly has some contingent value, right? If ETN goes down, like you'd absolutely see him probably taking the majority of the carries there. But I don't think he's really
spelling ETN is a good way to put it, where he's coming in to take a carry or two carries, and then ETN is going back.
Right.
Like there's very little mystery about what based on the week one stuff. There's very little mystery about what's happening when Tank Bigsby comes onto the field, and that's not the best.
Yeah, so I mean, me personally, like,
but he's more of a dampener on ETN's upside.
Yes,
than anything else.
I'm not panicking on ETN. Then again, I wasn't drafting much ETN in the first place, But I also think that I probably played the Tank Bigsby thing a little wrong, just because I was like, I've already seen this guy. He stinks, and I don't need to draft a running back that stinks. Like, I'll just draft the guys that I think are good instead.
Right.
But because last year, like when they needed him, it turned they were like, you know what, we'd rather play Dearness Johnson over this dude. And to me, that was like, all right, it's probably curtains for this guy. I don't need to bother with him this year. But it looks like he probably would. He actually does have the contingent upside, and I was operating under the assumption that he really did not. So that's probably a slight misplay. I think drafting Tank Bigsby definitely more defensible than I previously thought that it was.
Right. That makes sense. But you're not. I don't think you're starting him yet. I don't think you're playing him anything yet. But you're keeping an eye on it. Definitely. Regard to ETN.
Right.
So yeah, let's move on to the next chart. Damn, we are almost 2 hours in.
Oh yeah, we're gonna set a record tonight. On this one, there's a guy that stood out for me as like the clear buy candidate, and I love that his teammate is right here with him because it's just like it's such a stark contrast. It's JK Dobbins versus Gus Edwards. They're both in that 5 to 10 expected fantasy point band, with Dobbins being right on the cusp of 10 to 15 expected fantasy points, and Edwards being more in the middle of that 5 to 10 range. But man, if you're the Chargers and you're self scouting, there is no way that you keep splitting up the work evenly between these guys. Like, you have to just begin viewing Gus Edwards as like, Gus Edwards needs to become the Tank Bigsby of the Los Angeles Chargers. And I mean, JK Dobbins clearly should be getting more of the work in that offense. I would expect him to be moving right on this chart in future weeks.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense for sure. We thought he was bad. He's playing bad. We're excited about Vidal. So maybe it's JK Dobbins moving up, and then Vidal getting on the field.
Yeah, another one that guy that I think will likely be moving from where he's at right now. Like, I just don't think Joe Mixon is going to have 20 expected rushing points every game. Like, they're just not going to give him 30 carries a game. So good sell high window on Joe Mixon in redraft if you have the ability to trade him. If someone's going to buy into the fact that he's just going to get this monster workload. I mean, speaking of guys with monster workloads, though, like Kamara is just doing the same stuff he did last year. This is basically exactly where he was last year on charts, right? Just like gets an absurd amount of work, has a ton of expected receiving fantasy points. Like, do you think we screwed the pooch if we were fading Kamara in best ball at his price?
I'm not feeling bad about it yet. And some of that is just because we just saw an awesome week for the offense, and maybe the offense is just really good this year, and he's an important part of it. But you see some of the peripherals where his kind of advanced numbers are declining. He hasn't been playing well in a long time. The week 1 high expected point stuff, it doesn't faze me really, and maybe it's just hard to see him getting off the field, but I guess I think you're probably, if you see this all year, you're probably hitting a double with where he was going, and I think there's like, he's one of those players where given that he's older, given that he's been declining, you do have that asymmetric downside too. Yeah,
very, very well put. To me, I'm thinking that it might be one of the things where I think you're right that the home run, he's not going to hit a home run for you. He definitely could be hitting a double or a triple. And I think I'm really trying to look at this in an unbiased way, since I really think he's not that great of a rusher anymore. I think it just might not matter on the Saints because all the work is going to go to him. So agree with you that the ceiling is limited. But where he was going in
drafts, love doubles.
Yeah, where he was going in drafts was late enough that he could be a really good pick for best ball as long as he's able to hang on. And because really your only real concern, other than like injury and him breaking down, or just becoming so inefficient that they have to do something else, is that Kendre Miller comes on, or because as much as I think they're going to keep Taysom involved in this offense, I don't think that Taysom's ever going to be a monster volume kind of guy. He's going to get a lot of rushing volume for a tight end, but Taysom's not getting 12 carries a week, right? I don't think that's happening. And so I just think there's all this running back work to be had, and there's really no one to take it from him. So that's the way that I see him being pretty good.
That even as he potentially declines as an older back,
right,
throughout the drags of an NFL season, that it just doesn't matter.
Yeah, I think if we were going to guess how his chart looks 8 weeks from now, I would bet you his bubble's smaller, and I would bet you it's a tiny bit to the left, but it's probably not going below this 15 to 20 expected fantasy point range, which that's, to me, if you showed me the future and we got to, redo best ball drafts and you're like, it's week 8, Alvin Kamara is in the 15 to 20 expected fantasy point range, I'd be like, damn it. All right. I guess I'm clicking this guy. I don't want to do it,
right,
but I'm going to do it. Right.
Right. No, that makes sense. That does make sense.
Another guy who, as far as efficiency is concerned, I could see going in the opposite direction of Kamara. But another guy just getting an absolute insane amount of work is Breece Hall, almost cresting this 20 expected fantasy points threshold. Now, he wasn't terribly inefficient. You can see he's right about at expectation. I think a big part of that too was they were playing a really good 49ers defense. I haven't seen the success rate stuff for him yet. I don't know if you can pull that up, but there were a lot of runs where the 49ers were just blowing it up in the backfield or at the line of scrimmage. As a guy who really I love watching Breece Hall. He's one of my favorite players to root for. I wish I had more of him. I got overweight, but he was going, so high in drafts, it's hard to get that overweight on a guy. But man, there were a couple plays where he was just absolutely slamming himself into a defender. He was not dying easy. So he was really fun to watch. I think what you really are going to want.
Yeah. On your question, the advanced efficiency stuff, it was bad, but I think we're sort of chalking that up to the team just getting dominated by the
I'm not surprised at all to see that his efficiency and success rate stuff is not good after that. That was when I was watching the game, I was thinking oh, this isn't going to look good for for his success rate. And really what we saw last year with a worse version of the Jets offensive line, I certainly think their line has improved this year. He really struggled at success rate last year, and he really turned into more of that home run hitting, style of back. His success rate was worse than it was in his rookie season, but he just had that home run potential. And so I think, you just have that with Breece, where a big chunk of his value is going to come from those home run plays that he can deliver. But he also has just such a high baseline in that he is getting so much receiving work. And from watching that Jets game, I watched every snap on that game, and to me, it looks pretty crystal clear that is a hyper-concentrated offense. It is sure, Alan Lazard caught 2 touchdowns. I would be extraordinarily surprised if that is not a high watermark for Allen Lazard fantasy points for the whole season. Like it just looked like the Garrett Wilson and Breece Hall show. And I think that if you get a game where the Jets win or are scoring a lot of points or just playing an inferior opponent, like it's going to become very abundantly clear that Breece Hall and Garrett Wilson are extremely desirable fantasy assets. Like if you made me guess where both of them will go in fantasy drafts next year after just seeing that one game against the 49ers, I would bet that they were both top 5 picks next year.
Just want to we had a question here on the chat, and I've been doing some research on it. Was the Jamal Williams just garbage time, or was he getting early work as well? So I went into the RotoViz screener and just been looking at that. So Jamal Williams was actually playing the whole game. Like none of it was actually not none of it. It wasn't like he didn't play in the first 2 quarters, and then the fourth quarter comes around. That's where he got all his touches. He was getting kind of consistent usage throughout the game, and one I guess just to dig a little deeper on the Kamara stuff. So the Saints they did run 63 plays, and then Kamara was on the field for 32 of those plays, and so I guess 32 plays in the context of every running back who played, and then him getting a high usage on those will show up highly on expected usage stuff. But him only being on the field for half the snaps, and then I think he got something along the lines of, so there was 31 expected points, around 31, and then he got 22 of those. If you get a bad Saints game, he's going to be a lot lower on that expected points gauge. So even adjusting for the before adjusting for any week 1 stuff, and maybe his split of that declines, it is that does seem different to years past.
Well, that makes me feel better, because I certainly do not want this to be the year where Kamara is just hitting doubles the whole year. But I think we try really
for
hard.
2 hours and 7 minutes into the podcast to get that one off.
We try really hard to not be take locked, and we want to be able to adjust our priors with new information. And a big part of the thesis on Kamara was like, hey, over the course of the season, this old inefficient back is not going to be able to hang on to it. But I want to leave myself open to adjusting my priors if just, hey, the offense is better this year and he's getting lots of work. But I think the thesis of, hey, this might not be what we get the whole year, still seems reasonable to me. So I'm glad to hear that from you.
Yeah. Top tier, some top tier quote there. But that was a great question from Historical Anomalies. I'm glad they asked it.
A guy who seemed to get more work than his backfield mate, kind of starting to look like the 1A 1B situation, but I'm curious on your opinion of if this is a trend that's going to continue or if it was just a blip on the week 1 radar. And that's Tony Pollard versus Tajay Spears. What do you think about that backfield?
So, they were actually a lot closer in sort of snap share than expected points. So, the useful actually they were pretty close all around. So useful snaps for Tony Pollard 48%, useful snaps for Spears 38%. And then 12.5 expected points for Pollard, 8.1 for Spears. And then the coach Callahan says, actually, I wanted those guys to be a lot closer. That kind of suggests to me that, well, when you look at the points for Pollard, he had 5.5 expected points over expected from touchdowns. So it's basically he scored a touchdown that he was not expected to score, and then some negative stuff that's probably small sample for Spears. So I think if you're just looking at the points, you're maybe and you're looking at the carries, you're maybe putting too much. You're maybe thinking that they're further apart than they are. To me that looks a lot closer to something that will be a 60-40 split throughout the year. Now, some of the Spears' hope for me was that he would eventually flip Pollard. Certainly didn't see any sign of that or any inkling that might happen this season in week 1. But certainly not. I'm not panicking on Spears. As well, I'm more concerned about the offense being bad for Spears and Pollard as well, frankly, than I am about Pollard just like boat racing him in the running back race.
And then in a similar vein, what do you think about the Chase Brown, Zach Moss stuff? Or are we kind of chalking up this Bengals week 1 to the Bengals were disgustingly bad week 1? We probably can't have too many takeaways from it.
I don't know. I'm more hesitant to do that for that situation. So there you have a useful snap split of 51 for Zach Moss, 31 for Chase Brown, 12 round numbers, 12 for expected points for Zach Moss, 5.5 for Chase Brown, and then it's not like Zach Moss played terribly. He played fine, and Chase Brown didn't have this amazing game.
And Zach Moss did have the goal line carry too, which is doing a lot of work in those expected points. So if you pull that out, they're right about the same. But Moss did get more of the work.
Right. He got more routes. He got more rush attempts. He got 3 times the rush attempts, and he got more routes. So if you paid the cheap price for Chase Brown of like 10 through 12th round, I think you're still live. Well, I'm not saying that you're not live if you paid much more than that, but you're still live to have to have this season work out in your favor. But the expensive Chase Brown, where he's going way ahead of Zach Moss, like just looks flat wrong to me, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And if the Bengals play better, I'd much rather play that through Zach Moss, unfortunately, than Chase Brown.
So here's a fun one for you. James Conner and Josh Jacobs are neck and neck in their expected fantasy points, and in both how they did it too, in their expected rushing and expected receiving points. Which of these backs would you prefer for the rest of the season? Price agnostic. You can just pick one.
I mean, it feels a little easier to say James Conner, just because I like him better. But some of that is just because like I was clicking him more because he was cheaper.
Right.
Like that's my preference. I mean, rest of season, can I cheat and say that with Jordan Love getting injured and missing some games?
That's the easy out. But yeah, I mean, I think
it's probably slight preference Jacobs if you ignore that stuff. But you're getting much cheaper prices on James Conner for most of pretty much all the offseason.
Oh yeah, substantially cheaper. The other thing is they both have rookie running backs that might be nipping at their heels in the future. Where you've got Benson who did get a drive. There was now it's not like Benson was the only other running back they had in the game. They had Amari DiMercato as well, and so you're not. I think we still got a long way to go for James Conner seeding control of this backfield. And for Jacobs, Marshawn Lloyd is still injured, so you had, the name is escaping me of the guy they called up. But the fact that it is a question though for who do you want rest of season, and we can pretend Jordan Love is not injured between James Conner, Josh Jacobs, just kind of illustrates like, hey, this is why we don't draft the backs in the dead zone, because there's a guy that's going to do the exact same thing, and he's going multiple rounds later. So the Josh Jacobs, fading Josh Jacobs makes all the sense. Like Kenneth Walker or Josh Jacobs, I don't know, but you paid a lot more for Josh Jacobs than Kenneth Walker.
Right.
There was a point in drafts where people were taking Josh Jacobs in the 30s. It's just absurd. So looking like a reasonable fade there. Just purely cost based. Not saying that Jacobs is doomed to ever score fantasy points.
Fantasy is if I can get the same profile way later, I take the way later one.
Yep. Anyone else here, or should we move on to tight ends?
No, I think we've probably covered at least half the running backs in the player pool. So
yeah, we're being very thorough. It is week 1, so this is definitely going to be one of our longer shows.
A lot more to talk about.
Yeah.
So tight end and the big debate this year is elite tight end dead? We believe this is a very helpful chart in sort of helping to answer that question. So on the bar chart, the dark green, the green, that's the percentage of dropbacks that the tight end was running a route. It's pretty self-explanatory. Targets per run, what percentage of those routes were they getting targeted, and then how far down the field were they getting targeted with the ADOT. So receiving tight ends, we want them to be on running a route for all the dropbacks. We want them to be getting lots of targets, and we want those targets to be down the field. So just for example, Tyler Conklin, you do get all the routes with just a 7% targets per run and 2.5 ADOT. So that's like somebody who's starting. He is starting tight end. He is the starter. But this is why he was much cheaper than the rest of the guys around him in this chart, and why frankly I wasn't even drafting him at that price, because you don't, there's no upside here.
When you get these guys, when you get these guys that are running all the routes and have 7 targets per route run and an extremely low ADOT, your Tyler Conklin or your Cade Otton or your Dalton Kincaid, those are just guys that don't really belong on a fantasy roster. Sorry, I had to sneak the Dalton Kincaid dig in there. but really, they're not exciting tight ends with very much upside. I think that in best ball, those tight ends do have a place. The Conklins and Ottens are innings eaters, just like Zeke and Justice Hill are innings eaters at the running back position, right? That's what Tyler Conklin and Cade Otton are to tight end. I think with Otton too, you can make the argument that, he's a young player and he's literally out there 100% of snaps. Maybe there's a chance that, he continues to develop and does something special, but it's not.
This week he might catch 3 5-yard passes, 5-yard passes. But the elite tight end thesis, just to make the hammer point home here, is that some of these guys, for example, Trey McBride, is going to run a really high percentage of routes, and he's going to get targeted a lot on those routes down the field. That, to me, that kind of usage week 1 is suggestive of that's very likely to be an elite tight end hit. And even though you paid a lot more for McBride than Tyler Conklin, that he has the potential to score so many more points than McBride and probably, actually not McBride, Conklin, and a lot of these other tight ends that can get you the win. And now people listening to this podcast understand that concept. But just helpful to introduce the people in 2 hours and 20 minutes. Definitely understand why McBride doing that was good. Then the other one that's kind of an enigma here is Kyle Pitts, who did run 100% of routes, but just 11% targets per run, which that's really low for him, kind of like in the context of his career. The A dot and then the A dot is it's a bit I'm beginning to think that the Falcons might not be very good at their job, because none of this is kind of jiving with what they said, except for the routes. I'm concerned about the targets per run as long as Kirk Cousins is the quarterback. Because I think he's gonna do the dump off passes to Ray McCloud offense as long as he's playing, as he's out there. And are you gonna say that maybe the Steelers just took Pitts away?
No. I was going to say that I think the targets per route run is really a function of the Kirk Cousins, hey, this is a non-functional passer that we have back here just because he's not healthy and he can't, he was clearly doing the stuff that he felt that he could do, which was let me dump it down to Ray McCloud over and over and over again. And so
some people think that the tight end is supposed to be the quarterback's friend, but he really did have so it's a 7 A dot, which I guess is not terrible. But with Pitts having that kind of 9 A dot, he probably is not the type of player that is going to take the 2-yard hitch and then try and get yak like McLeod will.
Yeah, I'm not. As far as Pitts, I think the ceiling is still very available. Like the 100% routes thing is extremely bullish to me.
Yeah.
And I think that we know the talent is there for him. So you've got a lot of outs with Pitts. You've got the outs that Cousins gets healthier and becomes functional. And I mean, even like an 80% Kirk Cousins, like if he's 80% of what he was last year when he was healthy,
right. If he can just learn the plan.
I think Kyle Pitts is very live for tight end 1 overall with that, right? 100% routes Kyle Pitts with 80% Kirk Cousins. So the ceiling is still there. I think that
right.
If you're in a redraft league and you want to take a big cut, granted he did score a touchdown this last week, and tight end was so putrid that maybe someone's not willing to move him. But if you got someone that thinks they're being sly and getting one over by selling Kyle Pitts high, quote unquote, maybe you can go and look for something.
Right. But there's the issue, I guess, particularly in redrafts. In for example, FFPC redraft tight end premium. It's on even in that format. It's hard to that's a hard decision to decide to start Pitts.
Right. It's hard to start him right now. Yeah, I don't think that you've got a lot of ways that it could work for you, but right. It's probably
way too early to panic.
Right. It's too early to panic.
With this evidence that the Falcons have shown that we know Kirk Cousins is bad when they take the rookie early, when they sit him in preseason. We've seen enough. That does suggest to me that there's it's a higher bench likelihood than you might think.
Yeah. I'm less concerned about Kyle Pitts and more concerned about the Falcons offense systemically. As far as we're gonna rapid fire through elite tight ends, and you tell me if you're worried or not worried. Okay.
Okay.
So Kyle Pitts.
Worried.
George Kittle.
Not worried.
Trey McBride.
Not worried.
Travis Kelce.
Honestly, not worried.
Me neither. Yeah. Dalton Kincaid.
A little worried, and I think I've seen some stuff where Dalton Kincaid was getting He was in zone. He was getting zone coverage, and all these defenders were converging on him. Like the prior for Dalton Kincaid being bad was already kind of strong, and it being so easy for an offense to double Kincaid, maybe the defenses are just successful at taking him away all year. Definitely think there's a concern there.
Yeah, I definitely drafted some Dalton Kincaid because I didn't want to be too overconfident in my thesis that this guy stunk. But gotta say it does. I'm feeling much more confident in my assessment that he's not a special player.
Right. You have the prior there, and then you have like it's a confirmation of the prior. It's not a shut case yet.
No.
But it's the more we see of that, the more the concern. And then I think you have some interesting guys here. For example, Hunter Henry definitely looks better than the K. Dotton and Tyler Conklin types, where similar routes, and then better target rate, better A dot. Right now, not the most functional offense. Would hope that Drake May is somebody who could unlock him, but him getting this high route share, high target stuff is definitely helpful. And then Kobe Parkins. Sorry, go ahead.
I don't know if you watched the Patriots game, but did you see the target that Jacoby threw Hunter Henry in the end zone? It was a atrocious pass, but Hunter Henry made a great defensive play to prevent it from being an interception. And a better thrown ball is a touchdown there. Like, I think Hunter Henry. I mean, I go back to like the Hunter Henry that we got when he was a Charger, and like there was legitimate excitement that he might be the next elite tight end when he came out. And like we've got a much larger sample now where he's probably not going to be elite, but man, if Drake May is good, I could see Hunter Henry putting up more fantasy points than Dalton Kincaid this season. Like I wouldn't be all that terribly surprised by that.
Yeah, that is pretty unfortunate, but definitely what we've seen. I mean I don't want to overreact to the per outing for Kincaid, but it's not feeling great. I guess if you're gonna make a positive case for Kincaid, is that we were told he wouldn't have this 80% or close to 80% route share, so you're definitely encouraged by the routes. Like it's not this like gross split, that we feared might happen. So you got 83% of the routes, but the lack of targets, is definitely concerning, especially with how bad the rest of the weapons are. I think it's something to monitor because like he could have a great week too. Like we've seen him have good games, but definitely concerned.
Yeah, the passing down snaps or the snaps that Dawson Knox and Dalton Kincaid saw. Kincaid 26 snaps, Knox 18 snaps. So not route percent. Kincaid much higher route percent. So like if you're looking for the silver lining, like the cope that it could actually be okay for Kincaid, he's running lots of routes. He's out there. But yeah, I think Dawson Knox is very much more of a thing than people that were high on Kincaid wanted to believe. And I don't think that Dalton Kincaid is much more special than Dawson Knox, and so that's a barrier there.
Right. And then looking at like some of these guys like Hayden Hurst, it looks like, oh, should I play Hayden Hurst? He did get a 13% route run and a 13.3 ADOT. So that's 3 targets with a 48 air yards, playing the Raiders. I think that's just gross tight end stuff.
Yeah, I'm not super interested in Hayden Hurst. To quickly round out our other elite tight ends that you may or may not be worried about, Sam Laporta,
Not worried.
Mark Andrews.
Yeah, a little worried. I mean, you should be worried, right? We saw the per game. We saw his ADP drop in drafts after that game. There was the analysis that they had the cornerback on him, their best cornerback on him, and then they double teamed him a bunch. Like they made a concentrated effort to like not allow this man to impact the game. And I think you're worried from a standpoint of like if he was a star, if this is Mark Andrews' star, then like he should somehow find a way to still impact the game when he's needed most. So there is a little bit of concern there, but then he also is getting that kind of respect, and most teams are not going to be able to throw that kind of firepower at stopping this guy. So a little bit concerned, but still kind of hopeful that you get some good games.
Yeah, I would say I'm less concerned about Mark Andrews than I am Dalton Kincaid. Concern for Mark Andrews comes from, for me, that Isaiah likely looks very good. He looks like he's probably the third best pass catcher on the Ravens. And so I just think that's going to, they're going to run a lot of plays where there's both Andrews and Likely on the field. And I don't know that, Likely only had, 60-something% of the snaps. And I don't know, I honestly couldn't tell you if we're going to see that number go up or down over the course of the season. The
other thing with Likely is that he was single covered by a linebacker the whole game. And so if Mark Andrews is going to be double covered and one of those is Trent McDuffie, and then Likely is going to be single covered by a linebacker, then that kind of is the perfect storm for Likely. Obviously he showed out. He looked great in that spot, but that does feel like Thursday was a perfect storm for Likely, and it's hard. Like maybe his route percentage does go up just because he's their third best pass catcher, but I don't think he's going to get such a sweet situation again where they have to throw a lot, and then the defense is effectively ignoring him. They didn't ignore him. They did ask somebody to cover him, but they didn't ask their best player to cover him.
Right. Yeah, that's well put. Okay, last elite tight end, and yeah, this guy now falls into the elite tight end category. Brock Bowers. You worried?
Yeah, we are fist pumping him.
Yeah, I wish I didn't get enough Brock Bowers, man. Just watching that game, I was like, oh shit, I'm about 30% Brock Bowers short of a good time. I should have had this guy everywhere. I mean, what part of it is, and it seems like such a silly thing when you frame it this way. Like, why weren't we talking about it in this way during the offseason? But it's part of the thesis for why elite tight end is good, is that the position as a whole scores such a small amount of points that a player that can score a high amount of points in any given week, or especially if they can do so with a decent amount of frequency, is such an incredible advantage at the position. And so you don't need to score that many points to be good. And so the biggest concern I heard about Bowers this offseason was he's on the Raiders. The Raiders kind of stink, and oh gosh, they're not going to score very many points. And I mean, to past version of myself that kind of bought into that FUD a little bit, I would say to myself, they don't need to score a lot of points for him to be a really good tight end. It's going to be fine. They don't need many points for him to be an incredible play at the tight end position. So,
right, you got 70. So you got 7 targets there for 39 air yards.
First game of a rookie tight end career.
first game of a rookie tight end career.
And it's not like Michael Mayer wasn't involved either. Like they were. Did you see the drive where it went Bowers Mayer? They were just like, fuck everything else. It's just tight ends, baby. We throw to the tight end.
Well, what kind of is interesting? So, Bowers had a 78% route share. Meyer had a 40% route share, and so, I like Meyer was going in the last round of tight end premium. So, like from that standpoint, I'm not worried. And then he had a 19% targets per run. So he had 3 targets. So he was involved. He has a role. But like to your point, first game of a rookie tight end season, and he's like just like utter good prospect, like second round pick, like amazing player for Notre Dame, just completely crushes him.
Yeah.
So
man,
the talent is like definitely you're feeling very good about the potential that this is like top 5 tight end prospect ever. Like,
oh yeah, I feel very confident about that. I mean, if you got Brock Bowers on a good offense, like think about the Sam Laporta landing spot last year on the Lions, like one of the best offenses in the league. Like, oh my goodness, just imagine what Brock Bowers on a good offense, like
right.
He would.
Well, here's the thing: you got good points from him this week.
Right.
Right. And I guess so. Like I mentioned, they dropped back 40 times. Like that doesn't seem like an outlier stat for the Raiders. Like it would not shock me at all if that was their average, was 40 points a week, and then some of those weeks you got touchdowns as well.
Yeah, I think getting to the double.
I get what you're saying, where he's so good that if you got a good offense, then he would just like obliterate. But
yeah,
just for this season, it doesn't sound like we're going to get that. And I'm trying to make the point that like that's more than okay.
Yes. No. If he finishes outside the top 5 tight ends this year, I'll be pretty surprised.
Right.
I'd
ask what injury did he get?
Right. Yeah. If he could get double-digit touchdowns like Sam Laporta got in his rookie season, like Brock Bowers is very live to set not just like the highest scoring rookie tight end season ever, but like the highest scoring tight end season of all time. And I don't think that's that wild. Like he's very good. Like 23% targets per route run. I know it's one game, but like, oh my God.
Right. And like, they're certainly going to play defenses that aren't as motivated as the Chargers.
Right.
So, a couple of other situations I think we want to touch on here. So Tucker Kraft, he had like played on 100% of snaps with this just like atrocious targets per run. Like you get him in the last round of tight end premium, you're very happy with that pick. But Luke Musgrave just like deader than dead.
Yeah, Luke.
Unless there's an injury we don't know about on Musgrave. Like and that's pure grasping at straws.
Yeah, and I mean Kraft
played 25% of snaps.
And Kraft was a late addition to the injury report this week too. So like he wasn't 100%, but they had him out there 100% of snaps. So yeah, that Tucker Kraft remains to be seen how involved he's going to be in the offense. Also, as far as like actually getting targets,
right?
You know, he's out there. He's running wind sprints.
Yeah, it's like congratulations, you binked the starting tight end.
Yeah, you got the starting tight end.
You got the K. Dotton guy.
He's earning less targets than Johnny Munt. Congratulations.
I mean, I'm pretty like for the teams where I got him in the last round. I'm
you're happy,
pleased with that.
Yeah, for sure.
But
you have room to win is what you have now, Tucker Kraft, right? So,
like, yeah, and I don't think the Eagles were focused on eliminating Tucker Kraft.
No, and on the flip side, the Luke Musgrave, like you said, deader than dead. All the Luke Musgrave teams you drafted, you could have just if you auto drafted those picks instead, it would be better.
Yeah,
So that's unfortunate. A guy that I was two guys that were late darts that both showed stuff that is promising, but didn't show up with a good box score week one because almost no tight end did. Theo Johnson out there a lot, out there quite a bit, but got, what was it, 4 targets? Had a bad drop, not great. Offense looks atrocious. I think here what you're just hoping for with Theo Johnson is that the offense improves slightly, and he was a rookie tight end that got a ton of snaps in his first game, so you're just hoping for him to run.
Yeah. I mean, 76% run on week one of a rookie season, like that's encouraging from like a usage and kind of talent perspective. And then he had his target stuff, 11% targets per run and 8.3. Like that's far from elite, but it's mid tier. So if you get a better offense, then you're pretty happy.
And I don't see how it could be much worse than what we saw, but I won't dare the Giants to show me that.
I think you can cut. I think you can probably cut your Bears tight ends.
You can absolutely cut your Bears tight ends. Man, Gerald Everett -5 ADOT, and then Cole Kmet. Like, I don't even think Cole Kmet shows up on the backup tight end chart. He just didn't. Oh, he does barely.
Yeah.
Right next to Noah Gray. This is Shane Waldron. You suck. You're the worst, Shane Waldron. What's wrong with you, dude? Just like this is criminal negligence from Shane Waldron. Like, dude, do some self-scouting. Like, you blow. It's straight up. Just someone who knows Shane Waldron, send him the clip. Tell him to like check out his own players, figure out who's good on his team.
And then I'm not sure. How do we react to Juwan Johnson being on the backup chart?
Yeah, definitely a little concern there with all the Foster Moreau being on the field more than him. Foster Moreau was on the field to block a decent amount. They were pretty close in their routes. I think part of it, if you want the copium, you can like chalk it up to, he's just coming back off the injury. He missed a lot of camp. And he definitely, he's a converted receiver. So I think he's very much like live to be the tight end that gets more of the receiving work. It's a very interesting situation to watch play out just because it's really murky with Foster Moreau being there and getting snaps now, and Taysom Hill like technically having the tight end designation and taking inline snaps at tight end occasionally. So,
and then Foster Moreau had 4 targets.
Yeah.
So twice the targets, twice the air yards.
Well, Foster Moreau is Derek. Just for people that are not so in the know about Moreau, he is Derek Carr's guy. They go back to the Raiders together, and they're both like, I can't confirm or deny this, but I wouldn't be surprised if Foster Moreau and Derek Carr are in a Bible study together. Just saying, based on each of their Twitters and I think he's definitely Derek Carr's boy. Like he's this guy. Right. So
they're friends. It's a Bible narrative. But This is a gross committee now, right? Like,
it definitely, if I get one more week of Juwan Johnson's routes not increasing, I'm immediately becoming I'm actually not concerned yet. Next week, if it's the same, I'm concerned.
I'm definitely more than a little concerned for Juwan Johnson.
I just think just coming right off the foot surgery is enough to make me be like, let me just see how this, like, it very much could be a ramp up thing. The guy on the previous chart I wanted to mention too was Noah Fant with a good targets per route run, not a great ADOT. Again, didn't show up in the box score. Just guy to absolutely leave the light on for, though. Very clearly is now the tight end 1 on his team, though, which he was not last year.
So I think if you're drafting Noah Fant, this is pretty much from a player perspective and peripherals as good as you could have expected, where it's borderline tight end. It's borderline, tight end one usage. That's the best way to put it, in terms of like route share, and then very strong targets per route run, and the ADOT is kind of in line with his career, but getting the high target per route run along with an increase in route usage, that's as good as you can kind of expect. You just need that to come in the context of a better performing offense.
Yeah. Okay, we can go back to the backup tight end chart now, because there is another guy I wanted to talk about here. All the way up at the top, Jake Ferguson, if he had not gotten injured, was on his way to just absolutely smashing, looking like one of the guys that you really wanted to be drafting, because the Cowboys do not have any other target earners outside CeeDee Lamb. And yes, they were dog walking the Browns. This probably isn't going to be terribly indicative. He didn't get to even play a full game, so we have a pretty small sample. But man, it just, from watching the game, it looked like it was going to be Jake Ferguson and CeeDee Lamb, and then occasionally the Cowboys will get the ball to someone else, but they really would prefer not to. It's like, right. Do we have to throw it to Brandon Cooks? Do we have to throw it to Jalen Tolbert or the other, or Jalen Guyton, or not Jalen Guyton, the other Jalen? The Cowboys have multiple Jalen receivers. Even they tried the Kevontae Turpin catch a pass challenge, and they're like, nope, just get back to return duties.
So it's an MCL sprain.
Yeah.
And so he will come back this year.
Yeah, I haven't seen. Has he been placed on IR?
I haven't seen.
I don't think he was. At least not that I saw. So
I
that's
didn't see anything about it.
But it could be.
I saw that it was a sprain, MCL sprain.
Yeah. So just a
week to
probably
week.
a guy to keep an eye on as a waiver wire ad if he makes his way, if he gets dropped.
And then I guess as he comes back, would you play him week 1 on his return, or?
I mean, like if necessary, like if I don't have another good option, like if I'm staring down if I'm staring down like a Chigo Okonkwo, absolutely I'm playing.
Right. But you're not going to play him on DFS his first week back. You're not going to take him on a drug.
No, probably not. Maybe in the dog bowl, like first week back, if he's going undrafted, because people are scared it's first week back or something, and willing to do it. It's situation and price dependent.
Right. Well, I assume that he would be undrafted his first week back.
Yeah, I'd have a little. I'd dabble.
Okay. Onto receivers.
Let's do it. Let's bring it home with receivers.
Okay, so last year you heard it first that Jameson Williams is the best receiver on the Detroit Lions, and we were not wrong. We were just early.
Yeah, I think the exact quote was, "It's going to be this time next year, and Jameson Williams will be the wide receiver 1 for the Detroit Lions, and that won't be a hot take." And I mean, the thesis is playing out. I think.
Right, it's still a hot take. Let's
If you want my legitimate analysis, I think that what is likely to happen is that he's going to be taking away opportunities from Amon-Ra that people were overly confident that Amon-Ra was going to be. We were just penciling in that Amon-Ra was going to continue being this insane target dominator. I think he's still going to be very good. I would not panic if you have Amon-Ra. I just think that the price got away from us a little bit on Amon-Ra, where it wasn't. He was just going a little too high for what he is, which is a very good, possession receiver, power slot, like Diet Cooper Cup type guy. It's just that Jameson Williams is actually good, and he had a rocky.
He had a 94% route share. His He had a 27% targets per run on a 14.6 ADOT. And so then just an incredible day where like that's like I don't want to jump the gun, but if we got that for a full year, like that's wide receiver 1 on the season adjacent usage.
Yeah, no, I mean there's a reason he's breaking the chart.
Almost 25 points a game.
Yeah,
would be wide receiver 1, but everything you wanted to see happens, and then you've now seen that wide receiver 1 type usage, and then the question would be, now we've almost seen it. Are you like, where would if we're drafting again today, like, is he second round pick? Is he third?
So we're working on some rest of season rankings, and we were discussing where he should go, and I said he's over DJ Moore like comfortably for me. Like, it to me not particularly close.
Dog Bowl stuff, he's going average pick 33.9. So in between Godwin, Devontae Adams, like, and obviously this is early in the week stuff,
right?
But would you take him over? Would you want Ayuk over him?
Yeah, you probably want Ayuk over him just because. Well, I think it really depends because, like,
right,
I think
that's a tough one, right?
We've seen what
Ayuk.
We've seen what Ayuk's ceiling is, and like it's hard for me to see a ceiling higher for Ayuk than what he got last year, right? Like that. Just with the current situation for the 49ers, like something material has to change for Ayuk's ceiling to change. Like you need a Devo season-ending injury or something. Like so, and I think the ceiling with Jameson is just a lot more ambiguous. Where like, what if this is because like it's not like he just caught a deep bomb and that's why he scored a bunch of points. Like he was getting stuff underneath and getting yards after catch. Like he was good. Like he was very good.
He had a 27% targets per run.
Yeah. So to me, the thing that I have to keep reminding myself is like the way that you win in fantasy football is you get these outlier guys. Like you happen to get the outlier before everyone else was privy to it.
Right.
And it's like, if this outlier season is happening for Jameson Williams, kind of like how it happened for Puka Nacua last year, the last stop on the train was week 1 waiver run when like, hey, Puka's here. How much do you bid on him? The correct answer was everything. The correct answer was trade your league mate for fab before waivers run, just so you can guaranteed have more fab than everyone else. And so, I mean, if that's the outcome, even if it's a really small probability of happening, like that's a season winning kind of outcome. And so I don't know that you're getting out over your ski. Like, if there's a league where Jameson is on waivers, do you think it's ridiculous to spend 70% of your fab on him?
No, you spend all of it.
You blow it all, right?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. I had somebody asked me for waiver sort of a line of advice. I had them cut David Montgomery for Jameson today.
Wow. You really are a David Montgomery hater. David Montgomery is so useful for fantasy, man. You're such a hater. All right, Jameson is super fun to talk about, and we definitely needed to talk about him, but we have a lot of receivers to go through here. Man, you know who's pretty exciting here? Jalen McMillan. I don't know how much of that Bucs game you watched, and I say this. There's some things that I say where I'm exaggerating a little bit just because it's more fun. Like we are playing a game where we're trying to have fun. I mean, of course, we're trying to give good analysis here, so I'm not just like out and out making shit up. But like I say this with no exaggeration. Jalen McMillan could have had 4 touchdowns that game. Like He could have had 4 touchdowns. What is like? Holy shit! He looks pretty good. He's like consistently beating dudes, just like
So he
barely.
led the team in routes, which that's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
And then on the other hand, his targets per run was just 10% on an ADOT of 18. So obviously he was a deep route guy, and he was getting targeted on those deep routes. He connected on one of them, but was not able to on the other. You definitely maybe I'm being cold water here, but to like really get excited, you need that usage to evolve, right? Where
Yes.
he's expanding the route tree.
Absolutely. Yeah, you're not gonna win all the money with Jalen McMillan if he just keeps being Captain Wind Sprint. I mean,
Right.
you're gonna have a couple exciting weeks here when he connects on like for him to have a legitimate opportunity for 4 touchdowns in his first game as a rookie and run the most routes. Like that's very exciting. The upside is abundantly clear now. But for him to truly be a league winner, the role needs to evolve. And it's hard he's got quality target competition there is the toughest barrier. You've got Mike Evans who still looked like him. Like Mike Evans looked fantastic. Chris Godwin looked a little rejuvenated, running more routes out of the slot. So there's barriers to overcome for McMillan, but the talent seems clear.
Right, and that's pretty fair. And just to put a contrast on it, or like a similarity, and Xavier Worthy, who we were all pumped about when he scored 2 touchdowns against the Ravens, his targets per run was just 13%, reg share of 77%, and so we definitely it's Mahomes with the fastest player in the league. Like you definitely expect touchdowns there, and you definitely don't want to read too much into limited usage for a rookie in week 1, where like maybe maybe the reason they didn't put too much on their plate is because it's their first NFL game, and it's like you're fast, like you can do this, but then as the season goes on, they expand that route tree.
Yeah, so encouraging stuff for McMillan. Other guys on this chart that were less encouraging, I'm going to hit you with some rapid fire. Are you worried? Chris Olave, are you worried?
I mean, you have to be, right?
Really? I'm not that worried about Chris Olave. I think a big part of it was they're just beating the pants off of the Panthers, and there wasn't really a ton of need to like. Of course, you'd like to get him more and see him more involved, but I mean, it's not going to be every week that Foster Moreau is getting 4 targets and a touchdown. Like, I'm not worried on Chris Olave yet. If anything, I'm encouraged by the fact that the offense seemed functional, although I'm not like majorly boosting. I think it's net neutral for Olave because the Panthers also could just be terrible on defense, and so maybe it wasn't a sign of a fantastic offense, but a sign of a terrible defense.
Yeah,
but
that's fair. And like, it was just a 42% pass rate, even though the volume was there. Maybe those passes were kind of, and I know it was a high play action rate, so maybe it is just like Panthers are awful, and the tight ends are just hitting them down the seam on a play action, and it's like they can't stop that. So why would we do anything else?
Right.
Yeah, that's pretty fair. That's pretty fair. I was like, that doesn't seem great. But you're right there that we should be taking a longer view.
Are you worried about Marvin Harrison Jr.?
I'm gonna say yeah too. That doesn't seem great either. Where like normally with rookies, when you expect them to come on later in the year, it's because they don't start with a full route share. They play well when they're in there, but they don't play enough. And then as the year goes on, they play more. But he had a 95% route share, 8% target per run, 10 ADOT, which I guess is perfectly fine. I guess he did have that wide open play where he got the Rachel Green coverage. But that's especially where you took him. Like, you don't want to be making these kinds of excuses. It's like, oh
yeah, I mean, it's not what you wanted to see for him. I'm not panicking yet. I mean,
I guess the question is, would you still, if you draft him on a team, you still start him in week 2?
It depends on what else I have.
You are.
Yeah, it depends on what I have.
Do you start him over? I'm gonna throw a name out here. You start him. You probably start him over Deontay or something like that.
Yeah. I don't put a single Panthers player in my lineup unless I'm in a dynasty league trying to get a better pick.
Do you start him over Keon Coleman?
Probably, yeah.
Do you start him over Brian Thomas?
No.
So for a lot of people, then I think a lot of people are going to have like a player of Brian Thomas's caliber on their bench.
I just think Brian Thomas. I might have Brian Thomas pretty high. He looks like he might.
Yeah, he looks great.
He might just be the alpha, you know.
He looks fantastic. So maybe I'm picking a bad example here, but I think what I'm trying to get at here is if you drafted a kind of 0 RB team and you took lots of receivers, like, I don't want to name every receiver in that range, but I think there will be people listening who can start the bench receiver over Marvin Harrison.
Michael Pittman,
not over a jokester, but
yeah, Michael Pittman or Marvin Harrison.
For the rest of the year or just this week?
This week, and also rest of the season.
I think it's pretty easily Michael Pittman there.
Oh, well, okay. So
for this week,
for both, I think both is pretty easily Marvin Harrison, and it's because the weighted targets per route run for Michael Pittman are the fakest weighted targets per route run you've ever seen, because 80% of 10 is a really small number. 80% of 10 is 8, and 20% of 40 is also 8. So the Colts passing volume just is like, Michael Pittman has to be in the absolute nut worst situation for a player like Michael Pittman. Like, you're talking possession receiver in an offense that's going to have next to the lowest volume
sporadic passer
in the league, and the vast majority of the stuff that they want to do is like take these big deep shots. Like, Shane Steichen was really smart in how he used Anthony Richardson to his strengths. It was like, none of this dink and dunk shit. We know you can't hit the broadside of a barn if it's 10 yards away from you, but we do know that you can drop it in a bucket if it's 70 yards downfield. And so that was what they did. They were like, you want to just throw another 60-yard bomb? Okay. And so Michael Pittman is in the absolute nightmare scenario for Michael Pittman. Like, I would rather have Michael Pittman. Like, if Michael Pittman and Jacoby Myers could trade places, I would rather have Michael Pittman on the Raiders as the wide receiver 2 than Michael Pittman on the Colts as the wide receiver 1.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's fair that some of the situation stuff for Pittman is bad. But to get this many just, it's tricky to get this many, to get 36 routes and then targeted on just 8% of those. What's that? 3 targets, and he catches just one of them. Like, I think that's pretty panicky.
No, yeah, you're not. I mean, you're not happy to see it for Marvin Harrison Jr. certainly, but I think I'm willing to give it a little time. So, let's try and mow through the rest of this chart quickly. Tank Dell running a lot of routes. A lot of people concerned that he might not run the full complement of routes. It turns out he is still going to be running a lot of the routes. In fact, I believe Nico ran fewer routes than Tank. Am I correct on that?
And let me pull that up right now. But yeah, I did see that like he was playing exclusively or mostly in 3 wide receiver sets. But they ran a lot of 3 wide receiver sets was a lot of their formation when they decided to pass it. And yeah, he was 87 to 84%. For 87 for Tank, 84 for Nico, and then 89% for Diggs.
Yeah, I think the answer to Texans wide receiver was just yes this offseason. Like the CJ Stroud looks really good. Yeah. You're just hoping that Joe Mixon's not going to get 30 touches a game. And if that's the bet that you're making me make, you're like, Joe Mixon needs to get fewer than 30 carries a game, and all the Texans receivers are going to be incredible picks. It'd be like, where do I sign? Like how much of these players will you allow me to draft then? So yeah, looking very good.
It was definitely a high volume day for the offense. I think they had a lot of plays,
right?
And so that's some of why Joe Mixon has so many carries. But on those days where let's say the Texans need to win a game, it's far more likely to come from the receivers that's going to help them win the game. And then if you get a low volume day, it's going to crush Mixon probably a lot more than these guys.
Agree. Anyone else on this chart that you want to hit on before we move to the next one?
No, not really. I think we kind of covered it.
Okay. Man, okay, so I would say this was my favorite chart after we put all the charts together. But the last one with Jameson Williams being the absolute chart-breaking monster was probably my favorite. But man, this one's a close second because the Jayden Reed, dude, can you explain to me why the guy who was like, what did he finish last year? He's like wide receiver 28. He's getting drafted as wide receiver 35, a season where he had over 200 fantasy points last year, where he missed some time with injury.
Clearly mispriced all offseason. And the kicker is that he actually had a 74% route share.
Yeah.
Which was tied with Christian Watson and just below Romeo Doubs at 89%. But to have somebody has that insane efficiency on a per snap basis, and now he's actually going to be playing like on with the same route share, where he's in the same chart as Tyreek, Debo, Rashi, CeeDee Lamb, Mike Evans. So starter level snaps is what I'm getting at. And that like he had an awesome week 1. Certainly not expecting about 30 points every week, but set up to absolutely smash.
Yeah, Jayden Reed should probably be like a second round pick next year. Like I think that's I don't want to call it a lock, but like he is very clearly one of the more talented receivers in the league. The whole offseason.
So would you still start him with Malik Willis as the quarterback? That's the tricky question.
It depends on what I have, but I was talking to some people about this, and Jayden Reed, as far as his profile, is going to be more quarterback proof than the other receivers on the Packers, right? Where they're
going to run a lot of jet sweeps.
He's going to get carries. He's going to get short manufactured stuff. Like when it's the second quarter and Malik Willis has 2 completed passes for 12 yards, like you don't think that they're dialing up the Jayden Reed bubble screens? Like that is like absolutely the question is not when Jayden Reed bubble screen. It's how many Jayden Reed bubble screens are going to happen in that game. So, yeah, I'm likely starting him. This was to me like a relatively clear situation where he was the most talented receiver on his team.
Right.
And I think that people got blinded by the fact that the offense as a whole was efficient last year. And so it kind of, like, for people that weren't watching the games, it was a way to kind of obscure the talent gap from Jayden Reed to the other receivers. But, like, if you watched them play, like, add a little bit of context to the data, it was pretty clear that the guy was smashing. And that's why we were over on him the whole summer in our ranks. Like, he was the best receiver on the team, and he was going too late.
Right. Then the other one that's the most surprising, that is, despite all of the injury stuff, and kind of like less emphasis on Tyler Lockett, we forgot about him, but he did not forget about us.
He did not. No, Tyler Lockett stuffed it down my throat week one. I was making tons of Tyler Lockett realtor jokes this offseason, and he closed on me in week one. I mean, it wasn't a monster box score or anything, but it was very clear that, like, his role has not disappeared.
His snap share is down. Is just 71% route share, but then 13.4 ADOT, 35% targets per run, like, still very, very important to the offense.
Yeah, I think if you were, and I don't even think I ended up underweight Tyler Lockett because I had so much from early in drafts and he was going so late. But then he rose a lot, and then he ended up falling a lot again later at the very end of the summer. But I think really, like, if you're light on Tyler Lockett, what your thesis is, or what you're hoping for, is that he does something kind of like Alvin Kamara, where starts the season well, like is productive, like good pick at cost, hitting doubles for you, but that the absolute ceiling isn't there, and he's going to taper off as the season goes. But man, yeah, week one looks solid for his role and usage.
Yeah, for sure. You're right. As, like, he had a fast start, which maybe we should have expected as a veteran, and not overreact to it.
Right.
But a little bit of a humble pie, based on what we thought was kind of for sure slam dunk, that he was gonna ride off into the sunset.
Man. This chart is so stacked with good receiver. Like, this top right quadrant is just like a murderer's row. I mean, there's a couple guys in here that probably do not belong, like Alec Pierce and Brandon Cooks, but I think that if you just said, hey, I'm going to give you get to have this top right quadrant of receivers, and that's all your exposure for the whole season for fantasy, I think I'm going to do just fine, because, like, Brian Thomas Jr. looks very good. He might just end up dominating targets there, which that was the big concern was, he might be just like a deep ball guy. Him and Gabe Davis might be running wind sprints, clearing stuff out for Christian Kirk and Evan Ingram. I do think the Jags were very game plan dependent last year. Like, there were games where Christian Kirk and Evan Ingram just feast because that was the plan, like attack underneath. And they didn't really have terribly functional deep stuff, like, because they were not all that creative deploying Calvin Ridley, and he's probably not as good a player as Brian Thomas is at this point in his career. So I'm interested to see if Brian Thomas can be like the true alpha there. And I think what we saw week one is, like, it's not what we saw from Jameson, where it's like empty the clip on him. But at the same time, it's like it could be the last stop on the train for Brian Thomas too.
So yeah, you have a 20% targets per run, on 77% route share, and so and then a 2.4 yards per route run. So that's kind of like more of your typical rookie upside profile, where a lot of meat on the bone there to increase the route share, but he's also playing very well when he's in there. So easily could see him becoming the alpha by the end of the year. Speaking of rookies, the other guy wanted to talk about was Ladd McConkey, who he actually seems to come in pretty much close to what should have been expected, where he had a 32% targets per run on just a 6 ADOT, so just racking up those targets from the slot, and then just a 76% route share. I think that one is a bit more interesting because, like, the knock was always like, well, he never actually runs that many routes. But I think Ladd McConkey was going ahead of Brian Thomas for a lot of the offseason. I think I think week 1 is pretty strong evidence that he should go after Brian Thomas. He should be going after Brian Thomas, and it's a profile. It's honestly a profile that's hard to start right now because you don't have the upside through the efficiency, and then you're hoping for a big increase in snap share. Right now, anyway.
Yeah, I think. I mean, McConkey and Brian Thomas are going right next to each other. Like you were able to get him at, like 6-7 turn on underdog. And I think if you found yourself,
that was FFPC brain from me, then I guess.
If you found yourself double tapping the McConkey Brian Thomas on the turn there, you got to feel extremely good about that. The other guys going around there, like DeAndre Hopkins before the injury, JSN, Christian Watson, like all those guys, I very strongly prefer both Brian Thomas and Ladd McConkey to all of those players right now. I just think the upside for both of them is clear, and it's the fact that you're getting like clear runway early for these exciting rookie profiles is really, really bullish to me. I just think these are guys that you really want a piece of. And if you have the ability to get them, if you're in a redraft league and you can get these guys before they get big, like that to me is a good opportunity. The other one, this is probably like the best. I mean, it's kind of hard for a redraft because I don't know how you'd actually go about choosing when to start this player. But maybe he just becomes so dominant that it doesn't matter. But A.D. Mitchell, just like barely missing on having a monster day, like two potential huge touchdowns for him. I mean, A.D. Mitchell could be really exciting. And he just, gosh, I mean, if you just wanted Alec Pierce, but like he looks really good. So like, and his first game, he hasn't done anything really yet, but like we've seen enough of Alec Pierce to know that he's probably not it. But man, if A.D. Mitchell is just like the good version of Alec Pierce, that's going to be so exciting for this team. Probably a little hard to know when to start in fantasy, but if he does,
hard to know when to start.
If he hits his ceiling, where it's just like, couldn't you see? Like when you got the like prime Gabe Davis season with Josh Allen, when it was just like you don't know when to start.
He's in play every week in DFS until you get the big week where his price goes up and his ownership goes up.
That's a great call. Yeah, in play every week DFS. Play against the Packers next week.
Aren't you worried about Zaire Alexander? Absolutely not.
Yeah, I don't know how exciting that game's going to be. I'm like trying to find a fun matchup but it just looks like it might be a thing where you just need to start playing A.D. Mitchell every week so that you're ahead of when it happens.
Right. He's going to be. I'm not sure. Actually, that's a good question of like what his salary is.
He should be low. He should be really low.
Right.
Probably in the 4Ks. The George Pickens looked really good. You're just dealing with a low volume passing offense, but at least it's Justin Fields throwing in the ball, not Russell Wilson. I mean, yeah, like if you have George Pickens on a best ball team right now, you're just like, I think I'll just close my eyes and like hope to wake up in week 17 with George Pickens here and like hope that I get the big game then. I think you're going to get a bunch of frustrating games where you're cursing Arthur Smith's name.
So volume low, but then hope that you get some of the big deep targets from Justin Fields where he houses it.
Even it doesn't even have to be the deep targets either. Like George Pickens is the type of guy who can just take a slant to the house. To like some of his biggest plays have just been like the vintage Odell Beckham slant to the house. Like, and so you just need him. You need him to give George Pickens some opportunities. I would not want to bet on Arthur Smith, giving the good players the opportunities.
So the other thing I wanted to note here, whereas it's getting overshadowed a little bit by Caleb Williams not playing well, but Keenan Allen absolutely beating the Fat Keenan allegations.
Yeah, target dominator. Just
31% target per run at 11.68 on. So like, and then I think somebody saw that he actually they noted that his actual weight was like 211 pounds or something like that.
Yeah, it was a typo. In the article that was talking about he's up to 230, it was literally a typo. They meant to type the 1 number and they typed the 3 number. I'm not making this shit up. Like that's what we spent all offseason worrying about. Someone fat fingered a number, and we
in the notes app as well. I think it was
incredible.
And so then the way we could potentially use that, like, do we just keep playing Keenan Allen and hope that the offense turns around?
Yeah, I mean, from what I saw, there was definitely one that looked like Keenan's fault on the missed connections there. And then there was another one where it was like a very clearly poorly thrown ball that should have been a touchdown. I think, with the Roma Dunze injury, I think Keenan just, to me, this sets up as like, if things get better for the Bears and Caleb, it's because him and Keenan get on the same page, and they brought Keenan in to be the best friend of their rookie quarterback. Let's give our rookie quarterback a guy who's going to be open for him. Like think Adam Thielen for the Panthers last year, but if he was a good player. And so
he's in the meeting rooms every day. It's like, oh man, don't worry about it. We're going to get there. It's like, let's look at this getter and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Fit Keenan, that's a pretty good one.
Yeah. So the heel injury stuff that I had seen was that it was literally a blister. So I don't know. Be curious to see, but that was what I saw initially. But anyway, yeah, Keenan absolutely dominating targets. I think it's probably a good idea if you can get him, if he's, I don't know where he's going, like in the dog bowl this week. But if you could get him, very cheap, oh man.
Right. He needs to be undrafted to be
against the Texans too, though, where you could, like, what if the Texans just hang a bunch on the Bears and they get pushed?
I don't think that's on the main.
You're right. It's a night slate. It's the Sunday night game. So you're saying it's Keenan Allen captain for all the money.
Well, you also there's primetime Palooza.
That's true.
And so those are ones where
he'll be drafted 100% though.
Right, he'll be drafted 100%. He's the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. He's the 7th receiver on a 2-game slate. So, I mean, that's something where you could certainly give a really nice hit on.
Yeah, that's actually that's a good call. Really quick, just kind of like chewing through this chart. Luke McCaffrey getting on the field a lot more than I think people thought he might. The problem is it's an unplayable offense for fantasy. So very cool to see Luke McCaffrey get a role right away. Unfortunate, it will not matter at all this year, at least. That's a little hyperbolic, but
you can't. It is an unplayable fantasy team for fantasy, unfortunately.
Yeah. Jaylen Waddle. Oh man, all the people who told me you can never draft Tyreek Hill and Jaylen Waddle on the same team together because how could two players score fantasy points in the same week if they're both catching passes for the same team? Simply can't be done. It turns out that people might be overestimating the negative correlation. It is a very, very small amount of negative correlation between the players. They can definitely score a lot of points on the same week. Like Jaylen Waddle going over 100 yards, Tyreek Hill going nuclear, like just silliness to me. Like it turns out that Jaylen Waddle, the wide receiver who is a very good pick at cost, you could also draft with his teammate who is a very good pick at cost. So let's see other guys here. I think we covered most everyone.
Yeah. I think we can move on to the last chart here, which is so these are the 40 to 70% routes run guys where they're not necessarily so for example Jordan Addison is here because he got injured. They're not necessarily startable for fantasy, but when we see them in the top right hand corner of the chart, especially like let's say a rookie like Xavier Legette, he's playing well on 50 to 60% route share. That's the type of performance that could push him into starter territory. For the Panthers, how much does that matter? I don't know, but honestly, getting just under 8 points a game on 50 to 60% route share, that if he can deliver on that promise, that could be pretty interesting.
You just need the Panthers to find a way to be pseudo competent, and he could be really interesting.
So that's a 30% targets per run, on a 17 ADOT and 1.5 yards per route run. Now, listen, Jonathan Mingo got 26%. Deontay Johnson got 22%. So like that might be a true like in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man catches targets.
The whole Panthers offense I just noticed is on this chart. It's disgusting, and none of them are over 8 fantasy points per game. It's so over. Oh my god.
But I mean, I can see some life for Legette.
No, there's you need the offense as a whole to improve. It's not a player, it's not an individual player type thing here. I mean, unless the individual player you're talking about is Bryce Young. Like you need Bryce Young to take a step. The receivers,
if he goes from 59% routes to like 90% routes and continue playing like that, he could get like 12 points a game.
Yeah, I think you're just hoping that Xavier Legette eats Jonathan Mingo, right? Why does the larger receiver simply not eat the smaller receiver? Which like that seems honestly like, if you made me guess, that seems like the most likely thing to happen, right? Like Jonathan Mingo was atrocious last year. I think this Jonathan Mingo running routes thing right now is just like the Bears doing the Velus Jones cope. Like, please tell us we didn't waste this pick. Please, it's gotta work. Like, so I think,
but like it feels like a pretty good bet for a round one rookie to increase our route share as the season goes on. That feels reasonable.
So Legette's interesting.
And then I think we mentioned that Ray McLeod, his stuff is just like, that's just the offense being bad.
Yeah, that's
Like,
that's old school.
are you hoping for you're hoping for the Pop Douglas stuff from last year, but I think Pop Douglas is probably a much better player than Ray McCloud.
Yeah, I would agree. I think the Ray McCloud stuff is not something that you want to chase. That's just the one that, like, if we're gonna leave a light on for Xavier Legette, we also probably need to leave a light on for Devon Vele, because it doesn't. What matters in a Sean Payton offense is that Sean Payton likes you, and Sean Payton likes Devon Vele, and he's a rookie.
It's a cronyism offense.
Yes, yeah, and so listen, the biggest there's two really big factors that Devon Vele has going for him. One, Sean Payton has given him his stamp of approval, right? He's a rookie that was on the field a lot week one, right? He's out there running 60 to 65% of routes. Number two, his competition is Cortland Sutton, who did not look good, and Lil Jordan Humphrey, and who's the other Josh Reynolds that they were, so that
I'm a little so his ADOT was just 2. And so you have somebody who's like 61% route share, and then they rack up these two yard ADOT throws. That feels a little gimmicky.
I mean, that was the offense too. Like, Bo Nix's adjusted yards per attempt was also like 2. So I don't know.
Cortland Sutton ADOT 13, Josh Reynolds ADOT 8.4, Marvin Mims 13,
that's fair.
Lil Jordan Humphrey 5. So like that screams like they're Rondell Jones, Rondell Moore, kind of rookie year usage. Where like
Rondell Moore,
maybe that becomes a thing.
Freakishly tall and slow.
Right. It's like, why are they running that stuff with this guy?
Sean Payton doesn't have to make a lot of sense. I mean, right now, no other real guys to like put on the watch list yet from this chart.
Somebody I'm a little surprised to see on this chart is Polk, where I guess 62% route share, so that kind of suggests it's a little bit more of a committee, and because the top is Douglas at 76%, and so definitely room to run there on the route share. And the Patriots stuff is kind of a joke, to be honest, because Polk is 6% target for a run, and then KJ Osborne is
target dominating KJ Osborne to you
43%.
Yeah, no, the Patriots. I mean, so the Patriots are entirely, they're just a total hands off for for like a redraft. You'd never have a Patriots player on your roster or start them right now. Like, even Polk is not worth a stash right now, I would say, as long as there's someone better on the way.
If you drafted Polk in the main, do you think somebody should drop him?
If there's anything on, like, if Samaj P. Ryan is on waivers still,
it'll be stuff like Jalen Naylor, or
like, you're not dropping him for Jalen Naylor, right?
Maybe Greg Dortch.
You're only dropping him for Greg Dortch if you need production right now terribly. So no, you're not dropping him, but he's cuttable should you need, like, if he's the worst player on your roster and there's something good to pick up, he's cuttable right now.
And he's kind of on the watch list.
Yeah, he's on the watch list. Like, I'm not saying it's Jover for Jalen Polk. It's just I bet.
No, I'm saying he's on the watch list to cut him.
Okay. Yeah, it's gonna take a while for someone.
You need May to start, right? That's your hope, is that at some point May becomes a starter. And
you need two things to happen. Yeah, you need May to start, and you need someone on the Patriots offense to end up consolidating routes. Because right now, none of the Patriots guys are running the full complement of routes, right?
Right. No, nobody's 76% is the highest, and that's Douglas.
And Tyquan Thornton's right behind him, right?
At 72, yeah.
Yeah. So So what you really need is again, the larger receiver of Jalen Polk to eat the smaller receiver of Tyquan Thornton, and then he becomes usable. I think what we're going to see with the Patriots is it's going to be one of those things that takes a long time.
Yeah.
But there could you need made a play. You'd ideally prefer him to be good, which it seems like he could be, and then you need one of these guys to emerge. So it's going to be something where it's a real down the stretch type thing. So
yeah, it's definitely it's tough sledding. It's tough sledding for sure. And I agree. You probably don't want to cut him for some like absolute dust ball. But if there's something with real value, you don't say, oh, I need to hold on to Jalen Polk.
right.
I need to hold on to Demario Douglas. But okay, I think we got through week 1.
Can we one last thing that's going to make us really unpopular with the people?
What's gonna make us unpopular? I love being unpopular with the people.
If you needed to, and there was a good player out there, could you cut Dontavion Wicks?
Yeah, easily. He was in the fantasy pros after the Green Bay game. He's going in the last round.
Yeah.
So like, he's like, it's the profile of, oh yeah, this is a young guy who I think is really good. Unfortunately, he doesn't play enough for me to be able to play him. A la Troy Franklin, a la like Marvin Mims.
Yeah. We got a list of guys a mile long with a ship chasing clip.
Right. He's in that category, unfortunately. Like he feels a little bit more alive to put up a score than those guys, just because when Love is back, maybe he houses something. But maybe Marvin Mims houses something, or maybe like it's that type of play, unfortunately.
Yep. All right. I think that does it for week 1.
So thank you to the people. Surprised there's multiple people who held on to the end. Really appreciate you folks. Appreciate everybody who's hung out with us for the last 3+ hours. It was a lot of fun doing this. Can't wait for next week.